Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
What's going on, everyone? It is Jaron from Jeranism, back with a live video for you. Thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. Shout out first to all my patrons for making this channel possible. I do appreciate it so much. You guys are awesome. I've decided to call this video Quotes That Tell Us We've All Been Lied To. So, pretty simple little title. I was in the middle of making slides for each and every quote and sourcing each quote, and eventually I just realized it was simply taking too long, and it would be easier just to read all the quotes that I have gathered straight from OneNote, and then maybe make some short comments on those quotes as I read them. So that will be what this live stream is all about. It won't be pretty or attractive like my normal videos, because basically I'm just using a window capture, the OneNote application, and then reading from there. So no normally gorgeous text slides as I sometimes make, so my apologies for that. Also, just to address some comments on a recent video that I did where I included several quotes, the criticism was that in the middle of the quote, I would begin making comments and then continue to quote as if this, left the listener confused as to which words I was actually quoting and which words were mine. And so I went back to watch the video and wow. My apologies for sure, because they were exactly right. Sure, I knew which words were mine and which were part of the quote, but when I listened back and I kind of pretended like I was hearing the quotes for the first time, they were 100% correct with that criticism. So thank you for those who pointed that out, because they couldn't have been more correct. Really quick, let me show you an example of what I'm talking about, and this way you know what I will and will not be doing throughout this video. So on the screen you'll see a quote. It's an actual real quote that I, like one I'd read today. And it's like the ones I've read in my recent videos. But let's pretend like I was reading this quote, and I'll kind of read it like what everybody said I was doing that was wrong, and they're correct, because I said, quote, "I've already known for a long time that we do not have proof for the system of Copernicus." Oops, 1 second. All right, super chats, great. I'll be right back with those. Thank you guys so much for that. So anyway, if I was reading this quote, I would say, quote, "I've already known for a long time that we do not yet have proof for the system of Copernicus, which at the time was one of a 3 million mile distant sun, and so much more fantasy nonsense that it's practically a joke. But I shall not take the risk of being the first one attacking it. Alexander von Humboldt." So you can see what I did there? Yeah, bad Jaron. And so my critics could not have been more correct in this regard. I did it on 10 different occasions. So I totally stand corrected. I apologize, and I promise not to do that again, as to everyone but me, I guess that can be quite confusing, and I now realize that. So throughout this video, I will just simply read the quote in full without commentary until I end the quote. So this quote and commentary will now be easily separated. For example, we can have the quote from Alexander von Humboldt. Quote, "I have already known for a long time that we do not yet have proof for a system of Copernicus, but I shall not take the risk of being the first one to attack it." End quote. Alexander von Humboldt. Now, at the time of Copernicus, he had a 3 million mile distant sun and so much more fantasy nonsense, it feels like some sort of joke, etc., or something similar. So I'm just making an example case here. So anyway, thank you for that feedback. I stand corrected. I shall be severely punished for my transgressions. So now you know what to expect and how you'll know when I'm reading a quote and when I'm commenting on one. I'll try and keep my comments limited, but if anybody knows me, they know that I can't really say how successful I'll be at doing so. So you'll just have to bear with me. I'll also be creating a page on my website which will have all these quotes in a single post under this video when it finally posts to my jeranism.com website. All right, so let's begin with a question, and that question is, what is the point of this video? So, the point is that I think there are so many quotes, and so many, that tell us that we've all been lied to. Now, despite the current debate over the shape of the Earth, the first step to waking someone up is showing them that we've all been lied to. So if I'm able to show that all of the real science and many of the greatest minds of all time, quote unquote, agree that all tests show that the Earth is fixed, well, would you then realize that there's a problem? I hope so. I just want to show people what exactly led me to the understanding that for me is so clear, that the current scientific establishment has a certain worldview And that worldview says that we cannot be in a central position in the universe, and the quotes will prove just that. That observationally, they cannot say that we are not the center, that they make their choices on philosophical grounds, and some of them say based on, quote-unquote, modesty. It's not science. That is known as a worldview, and it steers their science and their observations in a direction, and people deserve to know that. It is the absolute definition of pseudoscience. It's being taught as actual science, and it's absolutely far from it. So, because in my opinion, it should show you what is going on and what we're dealing with, but really it's up to you. You've got to decide what to believe. So, in my opinion, the entirety of astronomy and cosmology is actually built upon this mediocrity assumption, this worldview that Earth cannot be central, it cannot be important, we must be no different than the lights in the sky. It's full of presuppositions, assumptions, begging the question, and in actuality, it's all just pseudoscience. But my hope is simple here. By the end of this video, you can realize that we are not taught everything, but we're just taught a one-sided, convoluted, concocted model that's built on assumptions and philosophical beliefs, and that any and all observations that show otherwise get buried or explained away using, of course, mathematics, metaphysical theories that allow them to keep this worldview and to maintain their status as the heliocentric, quote-unquote, geniuses that they are. And the choice is yours, to see them that way or to see them as I do, as priests of a religion who have devised clever explanations and basically mathematical, formulas to hide the truth from you, me, and the entire world. So just imagine for a second, maybe close your eyes if you want to get in touch with your inner self, and think for a second, if you realized today that the Earth was in fact still, that it was in fact fixed and of prime importance, if it was the apple of God's eye per se, would that change your worldview? Well, it absolutely did mine. It changed my entire life and my world profoundly. So my hope is that you hear these quotes and decide for yourself if you'd like to continue the belief centered around these forced explanations of these men to explain these anomalies, or if by chance, maybe you now realize, like I do, what's actually going on. And maybe you open your mind for possibly the first time to what is a myriad of other possibilities and various conceptions and ideas that better explain the world that we live in. So the choice will truly become your own, and you aren't cornered into a belief system that is taught to children before they can even understand or possibly question the worldview that is about to become part of their belief system. I think nothing is important as where you live, right? If the Earth is central and of the utmost importance, then I believe all humans deserve to know that and to operate their lives within that enormously important understanding. So let's get to the quotes. There are many more than I've assembled here today, so many more. I just tried to maybe touch a little bit of everything and tried to corral them. But I'm only pointing to quotes about this particular worldview and subject, so I won't be reading quotes today about the Earth being flat. You won't hear any quotes like that. You won't hear any evolution quotes. You won't hear quotes about the age of dinosaurs or those kind of things. Nope. Today is just going to be about the Earth. We're going to be looking at the Earth, its location in the cosmos, its centrality, its fixed position, and the tests and opinions regarding relativity and why it is that all tests, at least all tests that I've been able to find, prove that the Earth does not move. So in the end, when you hear the quotes and contrast them with what you were taught and what's being taught to our children and your grandchildren, perhaps then maybe you will see the issue and understand why so many of us are absolutely against what's going on and what's being taught. So the truth is that it is not science, it's pseudoscience, it's not reality, it's a mathematical conception, and it's not fact, but simply it's theory. And if, it's not the correct view of the world, but rather it's like a worldview pushed onto everyone through public and also, social indoctrination, as we've seen of recent. So I've got my OneNote opened here where I keep all my notes, and we can start to go through some of them. And I'm sure that there are many, many more, like I said. So if I've missed some, or maybe you find a quote that I have missourced or something's wrong with it, please leave a quote in the comment or leave a comment saying that I did so, or if you have any other quotes that maybe I didn't include that you want other people to see, you can leave those as a comment as well, and this way more people can see it. My quotes are kind of arranged in a way that makes it easy for me to kind of tell a story, so I'm going to get to those in a second. But before I start, I want to cover one thing that seems to me that all heliocentric religious zealots want to try and tell me when I say that the Earth does not move and that there's no tests that prove it. What do they always say? They say Foucault's pendulum. Well, you should notice that all of these quotes by Einstein and many others, not all the quotes because some are by Copernicus and people that were before Foucault, but I'm talking about all the quotes that I read that are after Foucault. Why would it be that Einstein would say that there's no experiment that can prove the Earth moves if he knew about the Foucault's pendulum, which he absolutely did. He knew about the Foucault's pendulum. So that's one thing I think people miss or that they don't really quite understand about Foucault's pendulum. And if you don't know about it, we'll talk about it real quick just because it is the one answer that I get. Where, this Foucault's pendulum proves that the Earth spins. Okay, let's talk about it real quick. So we have these pendulums everywhere, right? And these pendulums are basically attached to this presupposed spherical spinning Earth, which supposedly rotates once every 24 hours. But the Earth also goes around the sun once yearly, and the sun goes around the galaxy, and the galaxy goes around the universe at 2.2 million miles per hour. And these are all local motions. So somehow the Foucault pendulum ignores all the local motions but one. It only recognizes the spin of the Earth. Well, the Foucault pendulum miraculously stays lined up with the rest of the universe. And some try and say that it's inertia, but what exactly is inertia? Nobody even knows. I'll get back to that real quick, but I do want to show you, if I can get this up here, 1 second. I do want to show you a live stream of a Foucault pendulum. Let's go over there. All right. So this is a live stream of the Foucault pendulum. I don't know where it's at, but where is this at? Ludwig University, something, Geophysics, Department of Earth, Environmental Sciences. The web address is geophysics. I'll actually copy this and put it in the description, so if anybody wants to see this. But here you can see, and they've got these 24-hour snapshots, so you can see that the pendulum actually moves around this little thing. But here's the thing that people don't really recognize. Remember, how often does the Earth spin? Spins once a day, right? But no, you've got to do all these mathematical equations again. The definition of pseudoscience. Bring in these mathematical equations so that you can actually be correct, because if you look here, the direction of the plane of oscillation of a pendulum with respect to the Earth rotates with an angular speed proportional to the sine of its latitude. Thus, one at 45 degrees rotates every 1.4 days, and one at 30 degrees, which is about where I'm at, thereabouts, every 2 days. So it takes 2 days to rotate all the way around, but the Earth takes 1 day. You can read a little bit further here. It says, so many people have found that the sine factor difficult to understand, which prompted Foucault to conceive the gyroscope in 1852. The gyroscope spinning rotor tracks. Oh, good. I was hoping that I didn't accidentally not bring you over. I did. Continuing what I was reading. We're here. A Foucault pendulum is tricky to set up because imprecise construction can cause additional veering, which masks the terrestrial effect. Air resistance damps the oscillation. So Foucault pendulums in museums usually incorporate an electromagnetic or other drive to keep the bob swinging. This is an absolute lie because it says usually. So what, is there a museum somewhere where the Foucault pendulum swings by itself forever? No, sorry. You need an electromagnetic drive to keep the bob swinging. You have to have a magnet underneath it to keep it going. That's how things work. You can't just spin a pendulum and it go forever. That's against the laws of motion. So anyway, this is just, I wanted to show you this nonsense here, and we'll talk further about it. But like I said, a lot of people will tell you that it's inertia that causes this to happen, but nobody even knows what inertia is. All explanations about inertia involve circular reasoning. Usually it'll sound something like this, like a body keeps doing what it's doing because it has inertia. Okay, so what is inertia? Well, inertia is the tendency of a body to keep moving. Okay, that's great. But why does it keep doing what it's doing? Well, because it has inertia. What? But what is inertia? Well, it's the tendency of a body to keep doing whatever it's doing. Okay, but why does it keep doing whatever it's doing? And so on and so forth. It's just circular reasoning. You'll never get an answer. So perhaps inertia is a universal property. That's possible. And if so, then the ether or the firmament could be the very source causing the Foucault pendulum and the Coriolis effect. And this is why people like Einstein and others can't use Foucault's pendulum as proof that the Earth spins. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying here. You might hear heliocentrists tell us that the entire atmosphere and everything in it, talking about birds, butterflies, clouds, balloons, planes, helicopters, whatever you want to say, are all magically velcroed somehow to the Earth, spinning perfectly in sync with its axial rotation, and it actually reduces its speed also. You know, the atmosphere reduces its speed as you head towards the poles, so it's going 1,040 miles per hour at the pole, and as you walk north, it'll eventually be 0 miles per hour at the pole. That's what, of course, they tell us. But where does this atmosphere even stop spinning? At what altitude? Nobody knows. If we could get up in a balloon, let's say we all get in a balloon, and we travel upwards to the upper limits of the atmosphere, what would happen up there? It's utter nonsense. I mean, to think that the atmosphere, the air, is somehow attached and totally synchronized to perfection from 1,040 miles per hour to 0, and yet somehow we have clouds, we have winds, they all blow in every direction. This is a problem, folks. This is pseudoscience by its very definition. It's never shown, never detected, never proven, or scientifically shown in any way. Just absurdities that are required to save the heliocentric model. You know, like you can add a little theory here and some math there, and you can continue to have people believe that your little worldviews are fact. And, you know, I certainly don't agree with that at all. Basically, for me, heliocentricity is not even logically plausible, you know, let alone irrefutable. It's a theory that we are taught is based on scientific data, but it's actually purely based on a series of assumptions that were built up over the last few hundred years. For example, many of the assertions regarding these astronomical distances between lights in the sky are completely invented, and they're put into calculations on the a priori assumption that the Earth must be revolving around the sun, while at the same time, these assumed distances have another function where they're used as some sort of, you know, petitio principii device, I don't know, to, you know, indicate that the sun must be at the center because of that distance. Go figure. Here's an example of how it's done. We're told that the sun is too big to revolve around the Earth, right? But wait a minute. Isn't the sun's size determined in the first place by assuming how big it must have been in order for us to have a heliocentric model? Well, of course it is. Go figure. Other assumptions might include the alleged tilt of the Earth. You know, the tilt of the Earth's axis at 23.5 degrees. An absolute, desperately needed heliocentric variable that has no basis in the real world, where the sun simply orbits from the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn annually. But of these tropic latitude lines, they're not tilted. They're at an angle of 0 degrees. Both circles are parallel to the equator. In fact, the very word tropic itself comes from the Greek term tropos, which means to turn, referring to the fact that the sun turns back at these lines, and they aren't tilted in any way at all. Or the Earth supposedly darting around the sun at various speeds. You know, it orbits, right, at a faster speed at the northern winter and a slower speed at the northern summer, then back faster again, back and forth. But somehow all of this alleged speed change remains unnoticeable. Well, of course they like to say, well, we don't feel constant motion or speed, and yet the Earth we're on is changing speeds constantly. You know, basically at every single second. Sorry, I'm going to have to get a drink here already. All right, where was I? So, you know, I mean, not to mention the fact that the moon is also being dragged around at exactly those same speed levels. It's just, I don't know. How could it be in full, complete synchronization with the wobbly Earth, despite being 250,000 miles away from it? It's all such nonsense. So, what do I have on the screen here? Let me get over here to OneNote. First, I did want to say thank you to the Super Chats. Somebody left one before we even got started. Leaf Eaters, your work is great. I've been watching your videos since you began. I think you should repost some of your older videos for some of the newcomers. Very entertaining. You are an inspiration. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Rhino, just a regular guy who owns a P900 who wants to help shoot across the bay. Yes, I got you. That's going to come up fairly soon. I do have one observation I'm going to make at the canal as soon as I get my camera and before I take it to the Monterey Bay to do that observation. So, Rhino, I will let you know. Thank you very much for that super chat. I appreciate it. And if anybody else wants to send a super chat, I will read those in due time. But like I said, we're going to move over here to OneNote. Let's see here. Hopefully you can see my OneNote. I don't know. Oh, great. Why do you not see the text on the screen? 1 second. This could prove to be catastrophic. What is going on? There's no over here. Oh, there we go. Okay, I got it. Sorry. I had it on a blank page. That's probably why you couldn't see anything. So, okay, so we're just going to go through some of these quotes. I've kind of got them sectioned off. Please forgive me if I make any pronunciation errors, or I don't say somebody's name right or get a word wrong. I'm only human. I don't proclaim to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I probably make more mistakes every minute than anyone else, to be honest. But let's go ahead and just start out with something simple. This is theoretical physicist Michio Kaku telling us about cosmology. Hopefully you can hear this, and I'm not sure you will be able to, but we'll go ahead and try it.
Usually in science, if we're off by a factor of 2 or a factor of 10, we call that horrible. We say something's wrong with the theory. We're off by a factor of 10. However, in cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120. That is 1 with 120 zeros after it. This is the largest mismatch between theory and experiment in the history of science.
Okay, so thank you, Michio Kaku, and hopefully you heard that. I think it might have been a little on the quiet side, but yeah, he basically tells you right there that they're off by a factor of 10 to the 120th power in regards, and he says it's the largest mismatch in the history of science. Hopefully people get the importance of that quote and understand what we're dealing with, and then you can decide if these are really the people that you want telling you where you live when they just admitted to be off by the largest factor in the history of science when you're looking at experiments versus theory. That's because the experiments do not show at all what these theories are that they've been telling us about the universe forever. And I described it last night, but I thought I just mentioned it again real quick before we get to some of these other ones, that to me science is like a tightrope walker. Because the goal when you're a tightrope walker is to never look at your feet, because as soon as you do, you realize how high up you are, you realize you're in midair and that you may fall a long way down. But as long as you look straight forward, if you're walking a tightrope, you usually can walk safely across. And the reason for that is because you don't want to look down. You need to just keep looking forward, keep plugging ahead, and that's what science is doing. Science does not want to look at its foundations. They don't want to look at, and you can call it the body of science if you want. I'm talking about the people involved in it. They certainly don't want to look down. They do not want to explore their foundations, because if they did and they found a crack, that could collapse the entire thing. So they don't want to look down. They're just like a tightrope walker. But let's get on to the quotes, okay? So I started out with some that I'm just calling prime importance. And by the way, this video might be long. I've got over 100 quotes to read, and some of them are quite long. So either bear with me, or if you need to watch this in segments, you can do that. But my goal is to hit every one of these quotes today, and that's what we'll be doing. And then we'll read some super chats, and then we'll go to bed. So let's go to the first quote I thought was interesting here. Nietzsche had to say, quote, "Where has God gone?" He cried, "I shall tell you, we have killed him. You and I, we are his murderers. But how have we done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained the earth from its sun? Whether it is moving now, whether we are moving now, away from all suns, are we not perpetually falling? Backward, sideward, forward in all directions? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is it not more and more night coming all the time? Must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? Gods, too, decompose. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we, the murderers of all murderers, console ourselves? End quote. Let's go on to the next quote. Just some little topic quotes here. Like I said, prime importance quotes. This is Leo Tolstoy. Quote, "I know that most men, including those at ease with problems of the greatest complexity, can seldom accept even the simplest and most obvious truth, if it be such as would oblige them to admit their falsity of the conclusions which they have delighted in explaining to their colleagues, which they have proudly taught to others, and which they have woven thread by thread into the fabric of their lives." End quote. So, comment on this quote here is just simply exactly what I say about people like Neil deGrasse and Bill Nye. These men who have the ease, the greatest of ease at explaining the great complexity of the universe. They make it sound so simple, so easy. Oh, we figured it all out. but they can seldom accept even the slightest and most obvious truth if it would be one that would oblige them to admit the falsity of their conclusions, which they have delighted in. They explain it to their colleagues, and they've taught it to others. They go to auditoriums and speak about it, and they have, had it woven thread by thread into the fabric of their lives. Leo Tolstoy. So, again, hopefully you understand why that quote is there. Let's get into a little more detailed ones. We got Fred Hoyle here, who said, the history of science shows that each generation finds the universe to be stranger than the preceding generation ever conceived it to be. Next, we have Phil Platt. Many people have heard of him, right? The bad astronomer. What did he have to say? Well, you might take note here. He said, I have two things to say that might surprise you. First, geocentrism is a valid frame of reference. And second, heliocentrism is not any more or less correct. Stop and think, ladies and gentlemen. Think to yourself. If one cannot be more correct than the other, why are you laughed at if you say the earth stands still? Why is it being taught to children every single day in this world that the earth absolutely goes around the sun? Let's continue reading, and by the end of this, you're going to be baffled with the amount of scientists that say the exact same thing. It's the exact same frame. It's just a different frame of reference. There is no better model than the other, and yet one is being taught as absolute, complete, and total fact. Why? Because the other one might invoke a creator, might explain creation, might place importance on the earth. Let's continue. We've got George Ellis, and man, have I read this quote a million times. Let's read it again. Quote, people need to be aware that there is a range of models that can explain the observations. For instance, I can construct you a spherically symmetrical universe with Earth at its center, and you cannot disprove it based on your observations. You can only exclude it on philosophical grounds. In my view, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. What I want to bring into the open is the fact that we are using philosophical criteria in choosing our models. A lot of cosmology tries to hide that. End quote. George Ellis, a premier physicist in the world. And let's just comment on this real quick so you can go back and understand what he's saying here. This was a huge quote to me. People who have listened to me know that I read this every other show I do, because I was taught in school, science is all about truth. So, science doesn't lie. Science just is an unbiased observer. It's observations. But yet we see George Ellis tell us that he wants to bring out into the open that the fact that we are using philosophical criteria in choosing our models. A lot of cosmology, which is science, this is a branch of science, tries to hide that. So there's a branch of science out there trying to hide something from people? What do you mean? How could that be possible? Why is science trying to hide anything from me? Well, he's explaining exactly what he's telling you. They are choosing which model based on philosophical criteria. And he says, now, to him, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, great. That's his opinion. I don't care what he thinks, whether or not there's something wrong with that. But he tells people, what I want to bring out in the open is the fact that we're using this in choosing our models and that we're trying to hide that. I mean, you're going to learn by the end of this video the exact reason why. And the reason why is these guys cannot stand, and I don't want to say these guys because George Ellis is different. George Ellis is somebody who does try and place the Earth back at the center because, well, all observations show that it is. Yeah, pretty brilliant, right? I mean, that's what an unbiased science observer would say. When all the tests prove that the Earth is fixed and that things are moving away from us and that we are the center of the universe, then that's what it is. Except for if you have a worldview that says, no, we cannot be the center. I hate that idea. I can't stand it. It goes against everything I am. I don't want to be important. I don't want to have a God. I don't want to be part of creation. And then all of a sudden you will have cosmology trying to hide the fact that there is no difference between the two models. Okay, let's continue. Another George Ellis quote. Quote, this assumption is made because it is believed to be unreasonable that we should be near the center of the universe. End quote. Okay, comment on that. Again, we just talked about this. It's the assumption. Okay, so remember, we're talking about science. Why are we making assumptions? The assumption is made because it is believed to be unreasonable that we should be near the center of the universe. Who cares what you believe should be unreasonable? No, they just choose that because they're afraid of the fact that we could be the center. They would rather anything else be true and they will use any other concoction or formula or hypothesis they can, as long as it means that the Earth is not the center. Let's continue. And we've got Arthur S. Otis in his book, quote, "In the effort to explain the Michelson-Morley experiment, the thought was advanced that the Earth might be stationary. Such an idea was not considered seriously, since it would mean in effect that our Earth occupied the omnipotent position in the universe with all other heavenly bodies paying homage by revolving around it." Again, this is why I loaded the beginning of this these quotes with these, just so you could see exactly what I'm trying to point out here, that these guys said not such an idea was not considered seriously. Why? If all the observations, if you're a scientist and the tests and experiments and observations tell you that you're the center of the universe, it is not okay to say, well, we're not going to consider that seriously because we don't want to be the center. Ridiculous. Let's continue. We got a Stephen Hawking quote coming up next. Quote, "The universe might look the same in every direction as seen from any other galaxy too. This, as we have seen, was Friedman's second assumption. We have no scientific evidence for or against this assumption. We believe it only on the grounds of modesty." End quote. Stephen Hawking. Hopefully you understand what's going on here again. Stephen Hawking explains it on the grounds of modesty. But if you're choosing your worldview, then that is the opposite of modesty. You're choosing what you like, not what science is telling you, not what experiments are showing you, not what observations are showing you. You're choosing instead, well, we change what we see based on the fact that we want to be modest. That's not being modest. That's the opposite. That's being holy hell conceited like I've never seen before. That you are able to change science? You are able to change observations and experiments? Crazy. Let's continue. Edwin Hubble. I've read this many, many, many times too. Let's read it full. Quote, "Such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe, analogous in a sense to the ancient conception of a central Earth. This hypothesis cannot be disproved, but it is unwelcome and would only be accepted as a last resort in order to save the phenomenon. Therefore, we disregard this possibility. The unwelcome position of a favored location must be avoided at all costs. Such a favored position is intolerable. Therefore, in order to restore homogeneity and to escape the horror of a unique position, it must be compensated by spatial curvature. There seems to be no other escape." Now remember, Edwin Hubble, the one who coined the phrase the Big Bang, the one who told everybody, oh, all these galaxies are moving away from us, which certainly places you in the center of the universe. How else could everything be moving away from you? Well, what did he come up with? He said, well, wait. What if the universe and the planet and everything that we know is on a balloon? And as you blow up the balloon, technically, everything on that balloon gets further away from each other. Picture a balloon, put a bunch of dots on it, and start to blow it up. Now, pay no attention to who's actually blowing up the balloon of space, because that's what they call the expanding universe, and people might understand where that came from. This is why the universe has to be expanding, is simply because otherwise we're at the center of the universe. But they don't want that. So they say, no. We're in a balloon. We're on a balloon. It's being blown up. We're all moving away from each other, and everyone, no matter where you're at in the universe, would all see the same thing, everything moving away from you. Again, never been proven. Never been shown. It's pseudoscience. Hopefully you understand that. That's Edwin Hubble and his book from 1937. But again, look at how many... This quote is just so full of nonsense. Remember, this is a scientist who's making observations and saying, well, this condition would imply that we occupy a unique position. This hypothesis cannot be disproved. Okay? Remember what's being taught in school. Remember what you get laughed at for saying. If you dare say the sun goes around the earth, you will be laughed at. However, I'm about to read you 100 quotes that tell you that we're right in the center. Okay, so this hypothesis cannot be disproved. Okay, so why is it laughed at? Well, because it's unwelcome. Okay, good for you. What the difference does that make? Therefore, we disregard this possibility. What do you mean you're disregarding? If something cannot be disproved and you're disregarding it? Holy smokes. Why are you disregarding it? Because it's the unwelcomed position of a favored location, and it must be avoided at all costs. Ladies and gentlemen, please listen to my words here and understand what's going on. You have to look at this and you have to understand that they're saying that the hypothesis cannot be disproved that we're the center, but it's unwelcomed, and we're going to disregard it because it's an unwelcome position of a favored location, and it must be avoided at all costs. This is not science, ladies and gentlemen. This is the opposite of it. Such a favored position is intolerable. It's intolerable. What is that word when we're talking about science and observations? And Oh, well, I don't want to be in the center. It's intolerable. So let's make up whatever other nonsense. And what other nonsense do I mean? I mean the whole universe model that they've given you. This is what they've come up with. Because why? Because the alternative, saying we're the center, must be avoided at all costs. Such a favored position is intolerable. Therefore, in order to restore homogeneity and to escape the horror of a unique position, this is science. This is what scientists believe, that we have to escape the horror of a unique position. So let's just make up a bunch of shit like we're on a balloon. Let's just do that. There seems to be no other escape. Wow. Let's go to Einstein from The Evolution of Physics, page 212. Quote, "The struggle, so violent in the early days of science between the views of Ptolemy and Copernicus, would then be quite meaningless. Either coordinate system could be used with equal justification. The two sentences, 'the sun is at rest' and 'the earth moves,' or 'the sun moves and the earth at rest,' would simply mean two different conventions concerning two different coordinate systems." So there's Einstein telling you that, well, whether the earth is the center or whether the sun's the center or whatever, it doesn't matter. You could pick Mars. You could pick whatever you want. You could pick any light in the sky and say, oh, now this is the center. Big deal. But what do they choose? They choose the sun. Why? Well, they worship it. Let's go to the next one. Quote, "There is no planetary observation by which we on Earth can prove that the Earth is moving in an orbit around the sun." End quote. Physicist I. Bernard Cohen. Again, what more do I need to say here, folks? No explanation needed here. There's no planetary observation which can prove that we move around the sun, but it's taught in schools as fact, and it's called science, and people will run around and tell you it's scientifically proven. Good for them. How about Sir Isaac Newton? Quote, "Plato is my friend, Aristotle is my friend, but my greatest friend is truth. Truth is ever to be found in simplicity and not in the multiplicity and confusion of things." Oh boy, would that guy be turning in his grave today. They've simply destroyed anything simple and come up with the biggest nonsense theories and ad hoc explanations and pseudoscience that you've ever seen in your life. Let's go with Kepler here. Quote, "I demonstrate by means of philosophy that the earth is round and is inhabited on all sides, that it is insignificantly small, and it is born through the stars." End quote. Johannes Kepler. I just thought it was funny to point out here that the words philosophy is in there. You demonstrate by means of philosophy? Way to be a scientist, guys. Way to go. It's the best science term I've ever heard. I demonstrate by means of I demonstrate by means of philosophy. Oh boy, this is classic. This is good stuff. We're barely probably 10 quotes into the 100 that you got coming. Enjoy yourselves. Let's go with Edwin Hubble from the Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, 1937. Quote, "If the redshifts are a Doppler shift, the observations as they stand lead to the anomaly of a closed universe, curiously small and dense, and it may be added, suspiciously young." So, very interesting. No real comment needed there. I mean, his redshifts that he said are the reason is because galaxies are moving away from us, but if instead they're a Doppler shift, well then all of a sudden we live in a closed universe. It's small, it's dense, and suspiciously young. What are we told today? Oh, universe is 14-point-something billion years old, and this is fact. We can rewind the clock of the sky. Just rewind it. Rewind it back to a 1/10 of a 1,000th of a millionth of a second, and we could see how everything came into play. This is great. Let's go to the next one. Another Edwin Hubble from the Observational Approach to Cosmology on page 63. Quote, "Thus the theory might be valid provided the universe were packed with matter to the very threshold of perception. Nevertheless, the ever-expanding model of the first kind seems rather dubious. It cannot be ruled out by the observations, but it suggests a forced interpretation of the data. The disturbing features are all introduced by the recession factors, by the assumption that redshifts are velocity shifts. The departure from a linear law of redshifts, the departure from uniform distribution, the curvature necessary to restore homogeneity, the excess material demanded by the curvature, each of these is merely the recession factor in another form. If the recession factor is dropped, if redshifts are not primarily velocity shifts, the picture is simple and plausible. There is no evidence of expansion and no restriction of the timescale, no trace of spatial curvature, and no limitation of spatial dimensions. Moreover, there is no problem of internebular material, and for those who don't know, internebular material is considered today's dark energy, dark matter. So if you understand this quote, you basically will understand that he's saying that, yeah, if we drop these recession factors and we don't consider these red shifts to be velocity shifts, then all of a sudden there is no evidence of expansion. There is no restriction of the timescale. There's no spatial curvature. There's no limitation of spatial dimensions, and there is no dark matter or dark energy. But all those things are included in the current model because they have to be if you want to believe what you're told about the universe. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Again, I love to read things like this. The disturbing features are all introduced by the recession factors by the assumption. So again, all of their science is based on assumptions. And if they're faulty, then what? Well, we'll find out as more quotes come along. How about physicist James Coleman? Quote, "The easiest explanation was that the Earth was fixed in the ether and that everything else in the universe moved with respect to the Earth and the ether. Such an idea was not considered seriously, since it would mean, in effect, that our Earth occupied the omnipotent position in the universe with all other heavenly bodies paying homage by moving around it." Again, it's telling you what the easiest explanation is for the data, for the observations, for the real science, for the tests, for the experiments. However, such an idea was not considered seriously, since it might mean that we're the center. We might mean we're important. When guys look around the universe, even if you believe like the heliocentrists believe and all these other, there's no life anywhere. There's nothing going on anywhere. And yet he says it's not considered seriously because it would mean in effect that our Earth occupied the omnipotent position in the universe. Well, what's wrong with that? What? It's your worldview. It's their worldview. Let's go on to the next one by Ernst Mach. Quote, "All masses, all motion, indeed all forces are relative. There is no way to discern relative from absolute motion when we encounter them. Whenever modern writers infer an imaginary distinction between relative and absolute motion from a Newtonian framework, they do not stop to think that the Ptolemaic and the Copernican are both equally true." End quote. I don't know what else I need to tell you besides they're teaching one in school. They do not even fathom the thought that we could be the center, and everything I'm about to read to you tonight will prove otherwise. It will tell you that it's an equally true position to place yourself in, but look at the nature of our world. Look at what's happened to our world, and then think, well, what if everybody knew that we were the center? What if everybody knew how important Earth is? Would that change their perspective? No, people just care. I'm going to go with Elon Musk to Mars. This is going to be great. They can't put a camera on the moon for God knows what reason. But again, let's just continue on. Here we go. This is, we'll just read the whole quote. Quote, "It is shown that the cosmological interpretation of redshift in the spectra of quasars leads to yet another paradoxical result, namely that the Earth is the center of the universe." End quote. Got another quote from the same person. "The Earth is indeed the center of the universe. The arrangement of quasars on certain spherical shells is only with respect to the Earth. These shells would disappear if viewed from another galaxy or quasar. This means that the cosmological principle will have to go. Also, it implies that a coordinate system fixed to the Earth will be the preferred frame of reference in the universe. Consequently, both the special theory and general theory of relativity must be abandoned for cosmological purposes." End quote. Y.P. Varshny. Give you the book here. You need to read this quote again. I'll be here all night if I go through each quote word for word, but you just need to understand what he's saying here, that based on the observations now all of a sudden, it means that the cosmological principle will have to go. And we're about 2 quotes away from getting to the cosmological principle and the Copernican principle. I'll be reading those for you. It just tells you right here. "And consequently, all the theories of relativity must be abandoned, but yet today it's being taught as fact." Let's go to the next one. Physicist Richard Wolfson. Quote, "If the Earth, isn't moving relative to the ether, then Earth alone among the cosmos is at rest relative to the ether. Now, that may be an absurd possibility, but maybe it's true. I think you can see that this is not going to be very philosophically satisfying, and it isn't satisfying physically either. But it violates the Copernican principle that the Earth isn't special. It is particularly absurd in light of what we know from modern cosmology, namely that there are places in the universe, distant galaxies in particular, that are moving away from us at speeds very close to the speed of light. It's absurd to imagine that everything in the universe is pinned to Earth when there are such a wide range of speeds relative to Earth throughout the universe, but it suffices to rule it out on this philosophical ground." End quote. So again, this is a very important quote, and we're going to be talking about the Copernican principle here shortly. And again, this is just funny what they say. I think you can see that this is not going to be very philosophically satisfying, And again, now this may be an absurd possibility. Why is it absurd? Because of the worldview of these scientists. Again, if you want to believe in them and their worldview, be my guest. I choose not to. One more quote of prime importance here. This is Albert Einstein in his Kyoto address, How I Created the Theory of Relativity. He says, I have come to believe that the motion of, quote, I have come to believe that the motion of the earth cannot be detected by any optical experiment, though the earth is revolving around the sun, end quote. There's no more definition of pseudoscience than this right here. Okay? There's no experiment. However, my belief. That's what he's saying. Yeah, well, I've come to believe that there is no motion, there is no experiment that can prove that the earth moves. However, the earth revolves around the sun. Oh boy, it's pseudoscience. That's all it is. All right, let's move on to the Copernican principle. And I'm going to be reading this from Wikipedia. The Copernican principle. In physical cosmology, the Copernican principle is an alternative name for the principle of relativity, stating that humans on Earth or in the solar system are not privileged observers of the universe. Named for Copernican heliocentrism, it is a working assumption that arises from a modified cosmological extension of Copernicus's argument of moving Earth. In some sense, it's equivalent to the mediocrity principle. Let's read what the mediocrity principle is. The mediocrity principle is the philosophical notion that if an item is drawn at random from one of several sets or categories, it's likelier to come from the most numerous category than from any of the less numerous categories. The principle has been taken to suggest that there is nothing very unusual about the evolution of the solar system, Earth's history, the evolution of biological complexity, human evolution, or any one nation. It is a heuristic in the vein of the Copernican principle and is sometimes used as a philosophical statement about the place of humanity. The idea is to assume mediocrity rather than starting with the assumption that a phenomenon is special, privileged, exceptional, or even superior. But again, as I just stated, look at the universe around you, look everywhere, and where do you see life? Where do you see importance? Where do you see nature? Where do you see growth? Where do you see all these things happen here on Earth? So when someone says there's nothing very unusual about the evolution of the solar system, Earth's history, the evolution of it is, what is it? What are you talking about? It's extremely unusual. It's of prime importance. Let's continue. This is the back to the Copernican principle from Wiki. Hermann Bondi named the principle after Copernicus in the mid-20th century, although the principle itself dates back to the 16th and 17th century paradigm shift away from the Ptolemaic system, which placed the Earth at the center of the universe. Copernicus proposed that the motion of the planets can be explained by reference to an assumption that the Sun and not the Earth is centrally located and stationary. He argued that the apparent retrograde motion of the planets is an illusion caused by Earth's movement around the Sun, which the Copernican model placed at the center of the universe. Copernicus himself was mainly motivated by technical dissatisfaction with the earlier system and not by support for any mediocrity principle. In fact, although the Copernican heliocentric model is often described as demoting Earth from its central role it had in the Ptolemaic geocentric model, it was successors to Copernicus, notably the 16th century Giordano Bruno, who adopted this new perspective. The Earth's central position had been interpreted as being in the lowest and filthiest parts. Instead, as Galileo said, the Earth is part of the dance of the stars, rather than the sump where the universe's filth and ephemera collect. In the late 20th century, Carl Sagan asked, "Who are we?" We find that we live on an insignificant planet of a humdrum star, lost in a galaxy tucked away in some forgotten corner of the universe, in which there are far more galaxies than people. I'm going to end that quote there. Just because I want to make a comment on this. Of course, we've all heard Carl Sagan say this, but even after just the few quotes I've already read, do you understand the problem here? That scientifically speaking, you can't discount the Earth being the center. Yet here comes Carl Sagan, the science pusher, the science popularist, who says, who are we? We find ourselves that we live on an insignificant planet of a... No, that's your worldview. So thank you for pushing your worldview on us, on me, on my children, on all children across the world. It's beautiful. Really, really tremendous for you. In cosmology, if one assumes the Copernican principle and observes that the universe appears isotropic, or that the same in all directions from a vantage point of Earth, then one can infer that the universe is generally homogeneous, or the same everywhere at any given time, and is also isotropic about any given point. These two conditions make up the cosmological principle. In practice, astronomers observe that the universe has heterogeneous or non-uniform structures up to the scale of galactic superclusters, filaments, and great voids. It becomes more and more homogeneous and isotropic when observed at larger and larger scales with little detectable structure on scales of more than about 200 million parsecs. However, on scales comparable to the radius of the observable universe, we see systematic changes with distance from Earth. For instance, galaxies contain more young stars and are less clustered, and quasars appear more numerous. While this might suggest that the Earth is the center of the universe, the Copernican principle requires us to interpret it as evidence for the evolution of the universe with time. This distant light has taken almost the age of the universe to reach Earth and shows the universe when it was young. The most distant light of all, cosmic microwave background radiation, is isotropic to at least 1 part in 1,000. Modern mathematical cosmology is based on the assumption that the cosmological principle is almost but not exactly true at the largest scales. The Copernican principle represents the irreducible philosophical assumption needed to justify this, when combined with the observations. Michael Rowan Robinson emphasizes in the Copernican principle as the threshold test for modern thought, asserting that it is evident that in the post-Copernican era of human history, no well-informed or rational person can imagine that the Earth occupies a unique position in the universe. Unbelievable. This is all from Wikipedia, Copernican principle. You can read it yourself. I just copied it over and highlighted a few important parts. Again, they say, oh, well, this might suggest that the Earth is at its center. The Copernican principle, the principle itself, this is not scientific. This is an assumption. We saw earlier George Ellis saying that the assumption is made because they don't want to be in the center. And it's saying the Copernican principle requires us to interpret it as evidence for what? The principle of something requires us to, oh boy. It's crazy here. This last sentence here, talking about the Copernican principle, represents the irreducible philosophical assumption needed to justify this when combined with the observations. Notice it's irreducible philosophical assumption. This is not science. This is pseudoscience. The beliefs that we have been taught are not actual science. They're not scientific. Let's continue on here. This is just no particular quote. I think I wrote so I said, what is the basis of the modern science and technology? Because according to science establishment historians, heliocentrism is of course the cause. An online encyclopedia put it this way, quote, the scientific revolution can be roughly dated as having begun in 1543, the year in which Nicholas Copernicus published his De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium. However, the origins of much modern technology can be traced back, end quote. That was the end of the encyclopedia quote. Now I'm speaking. However, the origins of much modern technology can be traced back to the elaborate mechanical devices that sprung up in post-medieval Europe. Those toys are an outgrowth of medieval craft of clockmaking, and that craft, in turn, was an offshoot of the craft of applying complex mechanical technology for the purpose of astronomy-related needs. These devices were unambiguously geocentric, every one of them. This is something that even the researchers of the Antikythera mechanism, which you can see pictured below, who mostly are believers of a heliocentric model of the universe, assert, perhaps grudgingly. They obviously don't want everyone to know that devices like this ancient piece of clockwork expose the ancient roots of modern technology. This Antikythera mechanism is based off a geocentric model. Okay? So they don't want you to know that they were able to predict everything from eclipses to equinoxes, everything from a geocentric point of view. They had no idea that, we're flying through the endless space and nonsense. So now I want to read, as we continue on about the Copernican principle, this is the very interesting thing, and I think did I include pictures here? Yeah. Just to show you, this is the actual pictures from Copernicus's book on the revolution of the heavenly spheres, or whatever you want to call it. But there's a very interesting passage at the beginning of this book, and you'll see here it says ad lectorum de hypo, which means basically to the reader of this hypothesis, I believe is probably the correct translation. And you'll notice down here, it gets down here, and then it's signed vale, okay, which means goodbye in Latin. So the weird thing about this is it appeared in the beginning. It's the preface of Copernicus's book, but now we're told it's written by Andreas Osiander. The story is ridiculous. The story is that Copernicus, on his deathbed, gives his book to be published now. Okay, you can publish my masterwork. You can publish it now. And the person he gave it to went in, supposedly this Andreas Osiander, who happened to be stepping in for the real book publisher at the time, he steps in and writes a preface to the book, doesn't sign his name, makes it look like it's by Copernicus, and then publishes all the copies of the book, and Copernicus never knew that this statement was in the book. That's the actual belief nowadays. You got to be kidding me. And look, there's even a little drawing of the beginning of it, just like there is throughout the whole book. So, I mean, he went and did an additional drawing. he drew this when Copernicus drew the rest. It's just such a joke. But let's read what he said, because a lot of people quote this to Copernicus, and I can see why. But really, if you're quoting this, you should quote it to Andreas Osiander, because that's what we're told. That's what history says, that it was not Copernicus who wrote this, that somebody else was able to write the preface to his book and he didn't know about it. Give me a break. All right, to the reader concerning the hypothesis of this work. There have already been widespread reports about the novel hypothesis of this work, to which declares that the earth moves whereas the sun is at rest in the center of the universe. Hence, certain scholars, I have no doubt, are deeply offended and believe that the liberal arts, which are established long ago on a sound basis, should not be thrown into confusion. But if these men are willing to examine the matter closely, they will find that the author of this work has done nothing blameworthy, for it is the duty of an astronomer to compose the history of celestial motions through careful and expert study. Then he must conceive and devise the causes of these motions or hypotheses about them. Since he cannot in any way attain to the true causes, he will adopt whatever suppositions enable the motions to be computed correctly from the principles of geometry for the future as well as the past. The present author has performed both these duties excellently, for these hypotheses need not be true or even probable. On the contrary, if they provide a calculus consistent with the observations, that alone is enough. Perhaps there is someone who is so ignorant of geometry and optics that he regards the epicycle of Venus as probable, or thinks that this is the reason why Venus sometimes precedes and sometimes follows the sun by 40 degrees or even more. Is there anyone who is not aware that from this assumption it necessarily follows that the diameter of a planet at perigee should appear more than 4 times, and at the body of a planet more than 16 times as great as the apogee? Yet this variation is refuted by the experience of every age. In this science there are some other no less important absurdities, which need not be set forth at the moment. For this art, it is quite clear, it is completely and absolutely ignorant of the causes of the apparent non-uniform motions. And if any causes are devised for the imagination, as indeed very many are, they are not put forward to convince anyone that they are true, but merely to provide a reliable basis for computation. However, since different hypotheses are sometimes offered for one and the same motion, for example, eccentricity of an epicycle for the sun's motion, the astronomer will take his first choice, the hypothesis which is the easiest to grasp. The philosopher will perhaps rather seek some semblance of truth, but neither of them will understand any state of anything certain unless it has been divinely revealed to them. Therefore, alongside the ancient hypotheses, which are no more probable, let us permit these new hypotheses also to become known, especially since they are admirable as well as simple, and bring with them a huge treasure of very skillful observations. So far as hypotheses are concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy, which cannot furnish it, lest he accept as truth ideas conceived for another purpose, and depart from this study a greater fool than when he entered it. Farewell. Or goodbye, based on I think vale is goodbye in Latin. Anyway, when you find this online, you'll see it signed XX, and then it will say that it's Andreas Osiander, but just read the book. It's not signed by anybody. It says goodbye, and then Nicholas Copernicus begins his book. So I guess somebody snuck in, put this preface in there, and then didn't tell Copernicus, and he died on his deathbed, which, you know, my beliefs on that, I don't think at all anybody publishes a book on their deathbed. It's just ridiculous. All right. So, you can go through and read that again. There's so much in this that would take me forever, but I think the most important part is simply the end. So far as hypotheses are concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy, which cannot furnish it, lest he accept as truth. So are you somebody who accepts what Copernicus said as truth? Most people are. 99% of the world are. And the book tells you itself that if you accept it as truth, ideas conceived for another purpose, you will depart from this study a greater fool than when he entered it. 99% of the world fall into this exact statement right here. Sadly, I was one of them too. Man, I grew up my whole life believing that these things were true until I did the research, looked into it myself, studied these quotes, looked at what we're told, looked for the experiments, looked for the proof that we spin around the sun, and all of a sudden I realized exactly what you'll realize by the end of this video. There is none. Let's continue. I read this at the opening of the show. Quote, I have already known for a long time that we do not yet have proof for a system of Copernicus, but I shall not take the risk of being the first one to attack it. End quote. Alexander von Humboldt. Let's have the next quote here. Quote, dark energy is problematic. No one really knows what it is. We can make an educated guess and use quantum theory to estimate how much of it is there, and there might be, but then we overshoot by an astounding factor of 10 to the 120th. That is grounds enough, says George Ellis, to take a hard look at our assumptions about the universe and our place in it. If we analyze the supernova data, by assuming the Copernican principle is correct and get out something unphysical, I think we should start questioning the Copernican principle. Whatever our theoretical predictions are, they will in the end have to give way to the observational evidence. End quote. Real quick, I just want to comment on that part. George Ellis is basically saying if we get something unphysical, which is what dark matter is, which is what dark energy is, things that we can't observe, things that have never been noticed, but again, called scientific. But if these things are out there, then we need to look at the actual starting point. The starting point is exactly what we're discussing right now, the Copernican principle. We need to reassess it. Let's start a new quote. So what would it mean? The outcome were that the Copernican principle, So what would it mean if the outcome were that the Copernican principle is wrong? It would certainly require a seismic reassessment of what we know about the universe. If the Copernican principle fails, all that goes with that, the Big Bang, goes out the window too. Cosmology would be back at the drawing board. If we are in a void, answering how we came to be in such a privileged spot in the universe, it would be even trickier. And this is what you will learn by the end of this video. End quote, Marcus Chown is the earth at the heart of the cosmic void. Let's go to the next quote. Timothy Clifton from Oxford astrophysics member, PhD, quote, a fundamental presupposition of modern cosmology is the Copernican principle, that we are not in a central or otherwise special region of the universe. Studies of type 1a supernova together with the Copernican principle have led to the inference that the universe is accelerating in its expansion. The usual explanation for this is that there must be a dark energy to drive the acceleration. Alternatively, it could be the case that the Copernican principle is invalid, and that the data has been interpreted within an inappropriate theoretical framework. If we were to live in a special place in the universe, near the center of a void where the local matter density is low, then the supernova observations would be accounted for without the addition of dark energy. End quote. So again, I've talked about this before, and I've had people come at me and say, oh, prove what you're saying, prove what you're saying. I say, I'll show you several quotes that all admit that if the Earth is the center, it gets rid of everything, dark energy, dark matter, which currently is said to be 97% of the universe, or 95%. And it's never been observed. Guys, we're at what, 20 quotes now, 25 quotes? Is it obvious yet that we are being handed pseudoscience? I don't think there's any question about it. Again, what he's saying here is, well, it could be the case that the Copernican principle is invalid, which it absolutely is if you're basing it on observations, and that the data has been interpreted within an inappropriate theoretical framework. So let's continue. Remember, we're talking right now about the Copernican principle. I do have these things kind of separated out. We haven't even got to the experiments yet. We haven't even got to the fixed Earth yet. We haven't even got to the centrality of Earth yet. We still are on the Copernican principle. Let's continue. Jonathan I. Katz from The Biggest Bangs. His book is listed below here. Quote, the uniform distribution of burst arrival directions tells us that the distribution of gamma ray burst sources in space is a sphere or spherical shell with us at the center. Some other extremely contrived and implausible distributions are also possible. But Copernicus taught us that we are not in a special preferred position in the universe. Earth is not at the center of the solar system, the sun is not at the center of the galaxy, and so forth. There is no reason to believe we are the center of the distribution of gamma ray bursts. If our instruments are sensitive enough to detect the bursts at the edge of the spatial distribution, then they should not be isotropic on the sky, contrary to observation. If our instruments are less sensitive, then the end of the S3/2, I don't know what that is, law should hold, also contrary to observation. That is the Copernican dilemma. To this day, after the detection of several thousand bursts, and despite earnest efforts to show the contrary, no deviation from a uniform random distribution, which is isotropy, in the direction of gamma ray bursts on the sky has ever been convincingly demonstrated. Again, these guys are admitting that there is no experiments or tests that prove what they're trying to prove. Okay? They just are able to explain it away, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Physicist Richard Wolfson, quote, so if the Earth is at rest relative to the ether, then it alone is at rest. That makes us pretty special. Do you really want to return to a parochial pre-Copernican ideas? Do you really think you and your planet are so special that in all the rich vastness of the universe, you alone can claim to be at rest? End quote. Well, I particularly do, because this is all I've seen. All I get from you is pictures from space of Pluto with the dog Pluto on him. I mean, what are you talking about? The Earth is all there is, folks. Let's continue. Richard Liu, here's his quote. Quote, cosmology is not even astrophysics. All the principal assumptions in this field are unverified or unverifiable in the laboratory, and researchers are quite comfortable with inventing unknowns to explain the unknown. How then could, after 50 years of failed attempts in finding dark matter, the fields of dark matter, dark energy have become so lofty priorities in astronomy funding to the detriment of all other branches of astronomy? I demonstrate in this article that while some of this is based upon truth, at least just as much of the, I believe that's cosmic microwave background, I might have wrote that wrong, cosmology has been propped up by a paralyzing amount of propaganda which suppress counter-evidence and subdue competing models. I believe astronomy is no longer heading towards a healthy future unless funding agencies rethink their master plans by backing away from such a high emphasis on groping in the dark. End quote. Let's move on here. We got Hawking and Ellis when they wrote their book in 73. Quote, we shall interpret the Copernican principle as stating that the universe is approximately spherically symmetrical with every point since it's approximately spherically symmetrical around us. Again, just more evidence. End quote. My bad. Jeez. Bad, Jaron. I should be punished. People are just joining me. The problem is I keep commenting in the middle of quotes, and I'm trying not to do that, so I'll be more careful going forward. But anyway, I do want to comment after them. And again, this quote is just saying that we are the center. Let's go on to the next one. This is George Ellis in his book. Quote, additionally, we must take seriously the idea that the acceleration apparently indicated by supernova data could be due to large-scale inhomogeneity with no dark energy. Observational tests of the latter possibly are as important as pursuing the dark energy exotic physics option in a homogeneous universe. Theoretical prejudices as to the universe's geometry and our place in it must bow to such observational tests, precisely because of the foundational nature of the Copernican principle for standard cosmology. We need to fully check this foundation, and one must emphasize here that the standard cosmic microwave background anisotropy studies do not prove the Copernican principle, they assume it at the start. End quote. Hugely important, begging the question. They're assuming it at the start. Presuppositions, again, how many quotes have we gone through, guys? 30? I don't know, but it should be clear here that we're dealing with pseudoscientists. Let's read the next one. Alan Hirschfeld in his book, 2001, quote, in Newton's day, the Ptolemaic system and the Keplerian version of the Copernican system were taught side by side in universities of the world, but the pendulum of belief had swung irreversibly to the Copernican side. In the minds of most scientists, the heliocentric universe had become fact, yet there remained a crucial missing element in what was otherwise a complete and compelling picture of the universe. Not one shred of indisputable observational proof existed that the Earth moved through space. Here, then, was the holy grail of many of an astronomer. To prove that the Earth, in fact, revolved in a wide orbit around the Sun, the parallax of just one star, any star, had to be detected. The hunt for stellar parallax was on. End quote. Very important here. A lot of people might be jumping out of their seats saying, but we have shown parallax. There is parallax on the stars. They've shown it now. It's in a little tiny bit that nobody can actually see, but some guys with a telescope and a hill can do it. We'll get to that. Remember that? I promise you we'll come back to that fact, and I'll show you why it doesn't matter. Let's go with Max Born in his book, Einstein's Theory of Relativity from 1962. Quote, thus, we may return to Ptolemy's point of view of a motionless Earth. One has to show that the transformed metric can be regarded as produced according to Einstein's field equations by distant rotating masses. This has been done. By Thuring, he calculated a field due to a rotating hollow thick-walled sphere and proved that inside the cavity it behaved as though there were centrifugal and other inertial forces usually attributed to absolute space. Thus, from Einstein's point of view, Ptolemy and Copernicus are equally right. End quote. Next one. This is Otto Neugebauer, 68. Quote, the popular belief that Copernicus's heliocentric system constitutes a significant simplification. Okay, let's start over there. I'm going to grab a drink of water here. All right, I'm back. All right, let's try that again. Quote, the popular belief that Copernicus's heliocentric system constitutes a significant simplification of the Ptolemaic system is obviously wrong. The choice of the reference system has no effect on the structure of the model, and the Copernican models themselves require about twice as many circles as the Ptolemaic models and are far less elegant and adaptable. Modern historians, making ample use of the advantage of hindsight, stress the revolutionary significance of the heliocentric system and the simplification it has introduced. In fact, the actual computation of the planetary positions follows exactly the ancient patterns, and the results are the same. The Copernican solar theory is definitely a step in the wrong direction for the actual computation as well as the underlying kinematic concepts. End quote. Hugely important quote there. Hopefully you understood it. But again, if you understand that we're talking about a worldview, then these quotes start to make sense. Then you understand, well, wait a second, if the actual computation of planetary positions follows the ancient patterns and the results are the same, then why go look at all the heliocentric globies out there that will go around and tell everybody that science has already proven it. That science, well, how do we know when the eclipses are? Where's your flat Earth or your geocentric proof that the eclipses work that way? By the way, you may not know this, but all of NASA's computations for eclipses are done by a man named Fred Esperneck, and Fred Esperneck uses geocentrism as his base. But yet the heliocentric model is true, even though you can't use it as a basis to figure out when the eclipses are. Oh boy. Let us continue. We've got 3 more quotes within the Copernican principle. So here we got Wessel Valkenburg. Let's go ahead and quote this. Quote, "The Copernican principle states that humans are not privileged observers of the universe and provides our philosophical basis for assuming that on the largest scales the universe is spatially homogeneous. While it is one of the foundational aspects of modern cosmology, this assumption remains untested outside of the standard paradigm. Though it may seem pedantic to test something so obvious, the standard paradigm itself is built on shaky foundations, relying on an unexplained, gravitationally repulsive, dark energy component for observations to fit the model. The implications of this cannot be overstated. Assuming that the laws of physics do apply equally everywhere in the universe, the only non-Copernican configuration possible is one in which we live in a place that originates from the special initial conditions." Okay, end quote. Very important quote. So much there. I could just read it again. Hopefully you got it. But what else do you need to see? That again, we're seeing this over and over again, that they're basing all of their science, what they call science, on philosophical criteria, a philosophical basis. That, folks, is philosophy, not science. Okay? And I don't mind if they want to philosophize. I do all the time. I actually prefer philosophy than I do to science. I'd rather sit and listen to somebody tell me how they feel and how they look at the world and what they gather from it. That's great. That's what I want. But if I'm told something is science, then I'm pretty much going to accept that as being true, right? That's what we're taught. But now I can never think that way anymore. Never. Why? Because I realized science operates within a preferred, they have a deeply philosophical bias. Deeply, severe philosophical bias. Why? Because philosophically, these guys don't want there to be a center, let alone it be us. I mean, again, go back to that Hubble quote, intolerable. Stephen Hawking saying it's a modesty. I mean, if we allow Earth to be in the center, they think it's prideful. So what do? They figure out a way that fits their worldview. There's nothing more prideful than that. Okay? Anyway, let's continue on with the next quote. Excuse me. This is from a science article, September 26, 2008, called Dark Energy, Is It Merely an Illusion? Quote, "Although dark energy may seem a bit contrived to some, the Oxford theorists are proposing an even more outrageous alternative. They point out that it's possible that we simply live in a very special place in the universe. Specifically, we're in a huge void where the density of matter is particularly low. The suggestion flies in the face of the Copernican principle, which is one of the most useful and widely held tenets in physics. Copernicus was among the first scientists to argue that we're not in a special place in the universe, and that theory suggests that we're special is most likely wrong. The principle led directly to the replacement of the Earth-centered concept of the solar system with the more elegant sun-centered model. Dark energy may seem like a stretch, but it's consistent with the venerable Copernican principle. The proposal that we live in a special place in the universe, on the other hand, is likely to shock many scientists." End quote. So yeah, these guys were just talking about, the fact that observationally, we might be the center. It's so upsetting because we know that the Copernican principle is the most useful and widely held tenets in physics. No, it's not. Give me a break. That's what they teach you. That's what they want you to believe, that this belief that we travel around the sun is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Give me a break. Got one more quote for the Copernican principle. Here we go. It's by physicist Hans Reichenbach, and this is 1970. Quote, "It is very important to acknowledge that the Copernican theory offers a very exact calculation of the apparent movements of the planets, even though it must be conceded that from the modern standpoint, practically identical results could be obtained by means of a somewhat revised Ptolemaic system. It makes no sense, accordingly, to speak of a difference in truth between Copernicus and Ptolemy. Both conceptions are equally permissible descriptions. What has to be considered as the greatest discovery of Occidental wisdom, as opposed to that of antiquity, is questioned as to its truth value." End quote. Sorry. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that they come out and say these things. And, that's why, some of them are actually out there really trying to do science. But it's pseudoscience. They have a worldview. We've already gone through this many times over. But again, this is a great sentence here at the end of it. What has been considered as the greatest discovery of Occidental wisdom, which is that we go around the sun, as opposed to that of antiquity, which was a flat or motionless geocentric Earth, is questioned as to its truth value. But yet it's the greatest truth that's ever come to mankind. Let's go on. All right, so now we're on to experiments. And I just have a couple quotes about that. And most people know about the Michelson-Morley experiment, right? That it failed to detect any movement of the Earth around the sun. This had to be overcome, so they invented the Fitzgerald-Lorentz shortening of the apparatus. This is what was proposed. And eventually the paradoxical relativity theory was invented by Einstein to overcome the problem. However, there are 3 other experiments that have been deliberately ignored by universities because they support a central and a non-moving Earth. Just again, if you don't realize what's going on here, they've done tests, Michelson-Morley, because they can send lights around, bounce them off mirrors, and they said, hey, if the Earth is moving, then these light beams will arrive at different times when they get back, because if you're moving in the direction of the Earth's spin or moving against it, and we're about to find out that they could never find any change. So what did they do? They say that the reason that we see that is because of the Fitzgerald shortening of the device. So the apparatus actually shortens, and that's because, the apparatus shortens when it's going in the motion of the Earth. Absolute and total nonsense that has never been proven. Again, the very definition of pseudoscience. So the first experiment is the Michelson gale. You may not know about this one. This one detected that the ether passing the surface of the Earth with an accuracy of 2% of the speed of the daily rotation of the Earth. Thus, the Michelson-Morley experiment detected no movement of the Earth around the sun. The test after that was Airy's failure. Telescopes have to be very slightly tilted to get the starlight going down the axis of the tube because of the Earth's speed around the sun. Airy tried this test. He filled a telescope with water that greatly slowed down the speed of light inside the telescope and found that he did not have to change the angle of the telescope. This showed us that the starlight was already coming in at the correct angle so that no change was needed. This demonstrated that it was actually the stars moving relative to a stationary Earth and not the fast orbiting Earth moving relative to the stationary stars. If it was the telescope moving, he would have had to change the angle of his telescope. That was experiment number 2. Let's talk about experiment number 3, the Sagnac experiment. Sagnac rotated a table complete with light and mirrors, with the light being passed in opposite directions around the table between the mirrors. He detected the movement of the table by the movement of the interference fringes on the target where they were recombined. This proved that there is an ether and that the light has to pass through this completely destroys Einstein's theory of relativity that says that there is no ether. It is for this reason that this experiment is completely ignored by scientists. More recently, Cantor has found the same exact result with a similar apparatus. All these tests and experiments are never taught in universities, so consequently, scientists are ignorant to the evidence of a stationary Earth. Let's just put these up real quick. They're also in the description. These are the links to each paper if you want to read about Michelson-Morley, Michelson-Gale, Sagnac, and Airy's failure. Again, these are links that you can just click in the description of this if you want to go read, because a lot of people just don't know that they even exist. They don't care about those tests because they don't align with the worldview. And again, let me just stop here real quick and state something simple. You have to understand why the idea of geocentricity, the idea of a flat Earth, anything other than a heliocentric model is absolutely untenable. It's disgusting. It's gross to anybody that's an atheist. Do you understand that? If they've gone around bashing, I mean, how about the godless engineer? Like that joke. If that guy goes around bashing, do you think he'll ever look into flat earth or understand it or even try to? No, because the guy's gone around bashing God forever. I'm a godless engineer. Well, congratulations. I guess you're accidental. You came from, an amoeba. Yeah, right. The whole world is evidence of creation. All of it. Everything that you see. The sun, the moon, the fact that we have eclipses, life, trees, plants, the complexity of the human body. Everything. Evidence of design. And yet, we've got atheists out there. You think they'll ever look into this? You think they'll ever accept any of the words I'm telling them? They don't care. They are the ones just like these scientists. It's the absolute horror of being in a unique position. It must be avoided at all costs. If you're Red's rhetoric, it must be avoided at all costs. You can't look at this stuff. You must go against it because of your worldview. Do you guys see what's going on here? I certainly do. Let's look at some quotes around these experiments. And we're probably more than halfway done, maybe. I don't know. Like I said, we still haven't got to centrality, fixed Earth, axis of evil. We haven't got to dark energy and dark matter. We haven't gotten to Newtonian physics. We haven't gotten to relativity. We haven't gotten to ether. Got a lot of way to go. Let's go to, these are quotes about the experiments. So Bernard Jaffe, quote, "The data were almost unbelievable. There was only one other possible conclusion to draw, that the Earth was at rest. This, of course, was preposterous." End quote. I don't need to even comment on that. You should start to see a pattern here. You should start to recognize what I'm trying to show you. And again, the choice is up to you. I'm certainly not saying you have to believe what I do, because that's what I hate about what's being done in schools. That's what I hate about what's being done and what's being called science. Okay? I don't have to believe what you say just because that's your religious belief. I don't care. And that's the same for you. You do not have to believe what I would never tell you to believe what I do. My goal is that all these things were so eye-opening to me, they changed my life so profoundly that I want to offer them to you, and it's up to you. If they don't change your life, if you spit on me and call me a moron, go ahead. See if it bothers me. It doesn't. It doesn't even change a thing for my life. Okay? But these quotes did, and the stuff that I put in my videos did. And so my hope is by sharing them with the world that at least you have the opportunity to consider for yourself, because it makes a big difference if we're the center of the earth. if we're the center of the universe versus if we're some random speck in the endless vacuum of space. It's so totally ridiculous. Let's go to the next one. This is scientific historian Lincoln Barnett. Quote, "The Michelson-Morley experiment confronted scientists with an embarrassing alternative. On the one hand, they could scrap the ether theory, which had explained so many things about electricity, magnetism, and light, or if they insisted on retaining the ether, they had to abandon still more venerable Copernican theory that the Earth is in motion. To many physicists, it seemed almost easier to believe that the Earth stood still than that waves, light waves, electromagnetic waves, could exist without a medium to sustain them. It was a serious dilemma and one that split scientific thought for a quarter century. Many new hypotheses were advanced and rejected. The experiment was tried again by Morley and many others with the same conclusion. The apparent velocity of the Earth through the ether was zero." End quote. Again, I shouldn't have to read more of that. We'll just move on. The experiment was tried again by Morley and others. So if we're talking about science, which is based on experimentation, hypothesis-based experimentation, and they keep coming to the conclusion that the velocity of the Earth through space is zero, but what do they teach in schools? What did you grow up believing? Hopefully you see that this is the reason why, the name of this video is very simple. Quotes that tell us that we have all been lied to. Let us jump back over here. Let's continue. We've got Wolfgang Pauli. Quote, "The failure of many attempts to measure terrestrially any effects of the Earth's motion on physical phenomenon allows us to," and then he goes on, and thank you very much for the super chat. I'll read those at the end here, 1 second. At this point, Wolfgang, he stops talking about the experimental evidence and then goes on talking about all the theories of Einstein, which are mathematics and formulas and Lorentz contractions, and it becomes pseudoscience. But he starts out by saying that, we couldn't measure the effects of any motion of the Earth, but based on these formulas and these mathematics that Einstein gave us in relativity, we can say that it does move. But again, tests don't show that, and that is the definition of pseudoscience. Sir Arthur Eddington, Space-Time and Gravitation, page 20, quote, "The Michelson-Morley experiment has thus failed to detect our motion through the ether because the effect looked for, the delay of one of the light waves, is exactly compensated by an automatic contraction of the matter forming the apparatus, end quote. Again, you have to go back and listen again, that because they're not seeing the shift in the light that they expect, they then came up with the theory, oh, well, the apparatus, the testing apparatus, the one arm that's going in the direction that the Earth is spinning is shortening. And that's why the light rays are getting back at the same time, when clearly that proves that the Earth does not move, folks. Let's go to the next one. This is James A. Coleman, professor of physics and the chairman of the Department of Physics at the American International College in Springfield, Massachusetts. Quote, the explanation which had the most appeal in accounting for this negative result of the Michelson-Morley experiment was one that literally was dreamed up for that purpose. It is the so-called Fitzgerald-Lorentz contraction. In 1893, Fitzgerald suggested that all objects contracted in the direction of their motion through the ether. He reasoned that if ordinary objects flattened out upon impact with other objects, a rubber ball hitting a wall or a ripe tomato dropped on the floor, for example, then why would it not be possible for objects that move through the ether to have the force of the ether push them in or contract them? This would adequately explain the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment. The arm of the interferometer moving against the ether would be shortened, so that even though the light was traveling in that particular arm might have slowed down by the ether wind, this would be compensated for by having its path shortened. Objections to the Lorentz contraction hypothesis were rampant, as was to be expected, not only because there was no evidence to prove that such an effect took place, but particularly because Fitzgerald could not explain why objects would contract due to motion through the ether. The contraction hypothesis was originally advanced only as a possible explanation for Michelson and Morley's results, providing such an effect existed. Then, too, the theory said that all materials traveling with the same velocity with respect to the ether would contract the same fractional amount. Since iron is much heavier and stronger than wood, for example, one would expect a greater contraction for wood than for iron, but this, too, went unanswered. End quote. Again, just a fantastic quote here telling you exactly what's going on, showing you exactly that this is a worldview, that these guys are willing to make up anything. But this is what a heliocentrist would tell me if I said, well, what happened with Michelson-Morley? Well, you don't know about length contraction? You don't know that the arm of the apparatus was shortened during the test? Oh, can you show that to be proven? No, you cannot. It is an ad hoc explanation, excuse to cover up the results of an actual scientific experiment. Let's continue. Physicist Richard Wolfson, what happened when the experiment was done in 1887? There was never, in any orientation at any time of year, any shift in the interference pattern. None. No shift, no fringe shift, nothing. What's the implication? Here was an experiment that was done to measure the speed of the Earth's motion through the ether. This was an experiment that was 10 times more sensitive than it needed to be. It could have detected speeds as low as 2 miles a second instead of the known 2 miles per second that the Earth has in its orbital motion around the Sun. It didn't detect it. What's the conclusion from the Michelson-Morley experiment? The implication is that the Earth is not moving. End quote. Very important quote. We got Ronald W. Clark in his book Einstein, The Life and Times, 1971. Quote, the problem which now faced science was considerable, for there seemed to be only three alternatives. The first is the Earth was standing still, which meant scuttling the whole Copernican theory and was unthinkable. The second was that the ether was carried along by the Earth in its passage through space. The third solution was that the ether simply did not exist, which to many 19th century scientists was equivalent to scrapping current views of light, electricity, magnetism, and starting again. And so because they didn't want to start, end quote, sorry. And because they didn't want to start again, they just carried on with the belief. So it's ridiculous here again that you read, let me see the exact part that I was interested in. So the problem which now faced science was considerable. Three alternatives, standing still, which meant, so this part. The first was that the Earth was standing still. So this is one of the possibilities, which meant scuttling the whole Copernican theory and was unthinkable. Science, ladies and gentlemen, right here for you. Andre K.T. Assisi, quote, in the Ptolemaic system, the Earth is considered to be at rest and without rotation in the center of the universe, while the Sun, other planets, and fixed stars rotate around the Earth. In relational mechanics, this rotation of distant matter yields the force. Now, the gravitational attraction of the Sun is balanced by a real gravitational centrifugal force due to the annual rotation of distant masses around the Earth, with a component having a period of 1 year. In this way, the Earth can remain at rest and is an essential constant distance from the Sun. The diurnal rotation of distant masses around the Earth with a period of 1 day yields a real gravitational centrifugal force, flattening the Earth at the poles, Foucault's pendulum is explained by a real Coriolis force acting on moving masses over the Earth's surface. The effect of this force will be to keep the plane of oscillation of the pendulum rotating around with the fixed stars, end quote. Excellent quote there. This is a quote from Robert Sungenis that I thought was pretty good. Let's see if we can read through this whole thing. Here we go. So quoting, one can imagine why many who were looking for proof of a rotating Earth would appeal to the Foucault pendulum. It seems logical to posit that the reason the plane of the pendulum appears to be moving in a circle is that the Earth beneath it is rotating. In other words, the heliocentrist insists that the pendulum's circular motion is an illusion. The pendulum is actually moving back and forth in the same plane, and the Earth is turning beneath it. Since the Earth is too big for us to sense its rotation, we instead observe the plane of the pendulum rotate. All one needed to do to prove the Earth is rotating, he insists, is to reverse the roles. That is, imagine that the plane of the pendulum is stationary and the Earth beneath it is moving. This particular logic, however, doesn't prove that the Earth is rotating. One can begin the critique by asking this simple question. If the pendulum is constantly swinging in the same plane while the Earth is rotating beneath it, what force is holding the pendulum in that stationary position? In other words, if the plane of the pendulum is stationary with respect to what is it stationary? This is understood as the unresolved force in physics. The only possible answer is it is stationary with respect to the rest of the universe, since it is certainly not stationary with respect to the Earth. With a little insight, one can see that this brings us right back to the problem that Einstein and the rest of modern physics faced with the advent of relativity theory. Is it the Earth that's rotating under fixed stars, or do the stars revolve around a fixed Earth? As Einstein said, the two sentences, the sun is at rest and the Earth moves, or the sun moves and the Earth is at rest, would simply mean two different conventions concerning two different coordinate systems. As such, it would be just as logical, not to mention scientifically consistent, to posit that the combined forces of the universe which rotate around the Earth are causing the plane of the pendulum to rotate around an immobile Earth. In other words, in the geocentric model of the movement of the pendulum is not an illusion, it really moves. According to Einstein, there is no difference between the two models. Ernst Mach, from whom Einstein developed many of his insights, stated much of the same. He writes, obviously it doesn't matter if we think the Earth is turning around its axis or at rest while the fixed stars revolve around it. Geometrically, these are the exact same case of relative rotation of the Earth and the fixed stars with respect to one another. But if we think that the Earth is at rest and the fixed stars revolving around it, there is no flattening of the Earth, no Foucault's pendulum experiment, and so on. Robert Sungenis, well, that was Ernst Mach speaking there. Robert Sungenis continues here. Barber and Bertolotti prove that a large hollow sphere representing the distant star field rotating around a small solid sphere inside, modeling the Earth, produced exactly the same patterns of Coriolis and centrifugal forces that are claimed as proof of the Earth's spinning in space. If the hollow shell of matter accelerates or rotates, any objects inside the shell will tend to be carried along with the acceleration or rotation to some extent. Well, Robert Sungenis, thank you very much. Let's talk a little bit about begging the question, just so you understand some of these answers about the Michelson-Morley. This is from a cosmoquest.org forum that I found. How to commit the fallacy of begging the question when a conclusion to be demonstrated is assumed into a premise. Okay, so we got number one, an experiment is set up to demonstrate the motion of the Earth through space. Number two, a positive result is expected from that theory. Number three, the experiment produces a null result. Number four, the null result has a cause. Number five, the cause of the null result is not a stationary Earth, but because the Earth is moving. Number six, the cause of the null result is a moving Earth. Number seven, therefore, an experiment on the moving Earth has demonstrated that c is constant in any internal inertial reference frame. 8. Therefore, c is constant in all reference frames. Well, line 8 implies a moving Earth as part of the conclusion. Yet, line 5 merely asserts that the Earth is moving to conclude to line 8. Therefore, the constancy of c is invalid according to the fallacy of begging the question. 1 second. Excuse me. The only way science can conclude to one of the special relativity's postulates is to beg the question of the motion of the Earth as shown above. The constancy of c in any inertial reference frame is known from a logical fallacy. The constancy of c in any inertial reference frame is a postulate of special relativity. Special relativity uses four-dimensional space to mathematically explain the Michelson-Morley null result. Minkowski space is four-dimensional and is used to explain special relativity. But as special relativity is founded on a fallacious postulate, then so too is Minkowski space is also founded on a fallacious postulate, and as a fallacy invalidates a theory, then guess what? Both special relativity and also Minkowski space, are invalid. But again, you can look for yourself and you'll see that those things are considered explanations for the Michelson-Morley null result. All right, we're moving on to the centrality of Earth. Why do I have nothing here again? Okay, here we go. All right, so from George Ellis, quote, "This assumption is made because it is believed to be unreasonable that we should be near the center of the universe." So, end quote. Just point that out again. Very important one there. Let's go to the next one. Thomas S. Kuhn from the Copernican Revolution from his book 1959, quote, "Now imagine that the whole mechanism is picked up and put down again with the sun fixed at the central position formerly held by the Earth. All of the geometric spatial relations of the Earth, Sun, and Mars are preserved. And since only the fixed point of the mechanism has been changed, all the relative motions must be identical. The Tychonic system is transformed to the Copernican system simply by holding the sun fixed instead of the Earth. The relative motion of the planets are the same in both systems, and the harmonies are therefore preserved." End quote. Let's go on about the centrality some more. That's it. This is the editor of Nature magazine, Paul C.W. Davies. Quote, "Often the simplest of observations will have the most profound consequences. It has long been a cornerstone of modern science, to say nothing of man's cosmic outlook, that the Earth attends a modest star that shines in an undistinguished part of a run-of-the-mill galaxy. Life arose spontaneously, and man evolved on this miscellaneous clump of matter, and now directs his own destiny without outside help. This cosmic model is supported by the Big Bang and expanding universe concepts, which in turn are buttressed by the simple observation that astronomers see redshifts wherever they look. These redshifts are due, of course, to matter flying away from us under the impetus of the Big Bang. But redshifts can also arise from the gravitational attraction of mass. If the Earth were at the center of the universe, the attraction of the surrounding mass of stars would also produce redshifts wherever we looked. This argument was advanced by George Ellis in his article, is more complex than this, but his basic thrust is to put man back into a favored position in the cosmos. His new theory seems quite consistent with our astronomical observations, even though it clashes with the thought that we are godless and making it on our own." End quote. Astronomer J.L.E. Dreyer, quote, "The Earth-centered system is in reality absolutely identical with the system of Copernicus, and all computation of the places of the planets are the same for the two systems." End quote. What more do you need to hear, folks? It's being spelled out for you over and over again. We're probably at 60 quotes at this point, and is it sinking in yet? That's the question. Let me continue. We got Fred Hoyle from his book Nicholas Copernicus, pages 82 and 83. Quote, "We can take either the Earth or the Sun, or any point for that matter, as the center of the solar system. This is certainly so for the purely kinematical problem of describing the planetary motions. If we wish to consider the Earth to be at rest, it will be necessary to give an annual epicyclic motion to every object in the distant universe, as well as to the planets of the solar system. We can't dismiss such a procedure simply on the grounds of inconvenience or absurdity." End quote. Thank you very much for Fred Hoyle actually admitting that. However, he would be turning in his grave as well. Stephen Hawking in A Brief History of Time, quote, "All this evidence that the universe looks the same whichever direction we look might seem to suggest there is something special about our place in the universe. In particular, it might seem that if we observe all other galaxies to be moving away from us, then we must be at the center of the universe." End quote. But again, as I read earlier, Stephen Hawking changed that and says, but we dismiss this based on modesty. How scientific is that? Dismissing something based on modesty is scientific? Let's continue on the centrality of Earth. Y.P. Varshni, quote, "The Earth is indeed the center of the universe. The arrangement of quasars on certain spherical shells is only with respect to the Earth. These shells would disappear if viewed from another galaxy or quasar. This means that the cosmological principle will have to go. Also, it implies that the coordinate system fixed to the Earth with a preferred reference frame in the universe, consequently, both the special and general theory of relativity must be abandoned for cosmological purposes." End quote. I put this one in here again just because we're talking about the centrality here, and what he's saying is the complete opposite of what we're taught. We're taught that no matter where you're at in the universe, that they would all see the same thing. And yet, he's telling us, and he is astrophysics, I don't know what he is. I think he's maybe just wrote this book, The Redshift Hypothesis for Quasars, but he's telling us that these shells would disappear if viewed from another galaxy or quasar, which completely means that we are in a very unique observing position, folks, in the universe. We are of prime importance. We are the apple of God's eye. Let's go to the next one. The Earth-centered system, J.L.E. Dreyer again. I think we already read this one. The Earth-centered system is in reality absolutely identical with the system of Copernicus, and all computation of the places in the planets are the same for the two systems. Next one. Henry Poincaré. Quote, a great deal of research has been carried out concerning the influence of the Earth's movement. The results were always negative. We do not have any means of discovering whether or not we are carried along in a uniform motion of translation, end quote. Again, we've got another person telling you that we don't know whether the Earth moves, but it's being taught in schools to your children. How about Adolf Baker from Modern Physics and Antiphysics? Quote, always the speed of light was precisely the same. Thus, the failure of Michelson-Morley to observe different speeds of light at different times of year suggested that the Earth must be at rest. It was therefore the preferred frame for measuring absolute motion in space. Yet we have known since Galileo that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Why should it be at rest in space? End quote. Well, this is the way these guys think, you know? Yet we have known since Galileo that the Earth is not the center of the universe. So why should it be at rest in space? So they're discounting what the observations are telling them. They're discounting what the science tells them, what the experiments say, and say, but we've known. We've known since Galileo that the Earth's not the center. Next one on centrality. But what is less known is that, quote, but what is less known is that Tycho Brahe, Kepler's tutor, developed a geostatic system that was just as accurate and as elegant as Kepler's. The sun orbits the Earth, and all the other planets orbit the sun. The trajectories are ellipses, and all of Kepler's laws are satisfied. We can therefore conclude that the sun's orbit in the Earth's pseudo-potential is equivalent to that observed from the Earth in the heliocentric system. The analysis of planetary motions has been performed in the Newtonian framework with the assumption of Mach's principle. The kinematical equivalence of the Copernican, the heliocentric, and the Neo-Tychonian, geocentric systems is shown to be a consequence of the presence of pseudo-potential in the geocentric system, which, according to Mach, must be regarded as the real potential originating from the fact of simultaneous accelerations of the universe. If one could put the whole universe in accelerated motion around the Earth, the pseudo-potential corresponding to the pseudo-force will immediately be generated. That same pseudo-potential then causes the universe to stay in that very state of motion without the need of any exterior forces acting upon it. End quote. And that's Luka Popov. Got another quote on the centrality by astronomer Gerardus D. Bow, Ph.D. Quote, again, once more for the record, it has been shown at least 6 different ways this century alone that the equations in physics used by NASA to launch satellites are identical to the equations derived from a geocentric universe. Thus, if the space program is proof of anything, it proves geocentricity and disproves heliocentrism. The evidence for heliocentrism is even weaker than the evidence of evolution. End quote. Okay, let's move on to fixed Earth. Got a few more here. Let's see how much we're doing. How we doing here? Good. All right, we're on to fixed Earth quotes. Okay, here we go. This is Dennis W. Schema, The Unity of the Universe, 1961 book. According to his wiki, by the way, he is one of the founding fathers of modern cosmology. Quote, whether the Earth rotates once a day from west to east, as Copernicus taught, or the heavens revolve once a day from east to west, as his predecessors believed, the observable phenomenon will be exactly the same. This shows a defect in Newtonian dynamics, since an empirical science ought not to contain a metaphysical assumption which can never be proved or disproved by observation. End quote. One of the most important quotes of the entire night, right there. Again, so important. Okay, here we go now. Let's move on. All right. Physicist Julian B. Barber, quote, thus, even now, 3.5 centuries after Galileo, it is still remarkably difficult to say categorically whether the Earth moves, end quote. Again, and you know, here's how somebody might refute these, is they're going to come to me and say, yeah, but Julian Barber believes in the universe. He believes that the Earth does move. Yeah, I know that. Thank you. I understand the worldview of scientists. I completely been explaining it the entire show. But also, he tells you right here that it's still remarkably difficult, because there's no experiment that's ever shown it, to say categorically whether the Earth moves or not. I know what they believe. I'm not confusing that. All right, let's go back to Fred Hoyle in his book. He says that, quote, we might hope, therefore, that the Einstein theory, which is well suited to such problems, would throw more light on the matter. But instead of adding further support to the heliocentric picture of the planetary motions, the Einstein theory goes in the opposite direction, giving increased respectability to the geocentric picture, end quote. Again, this is Fred Hoyle. You know, I think a one-time astronomer royale. Let's continue. This is from Einstein's Ether. It's a book from 2001. Quote, according to Einstein, the argument over whether the Earth turns around the heavens... According to Einstein, the argument over whether the Earth turns around or the heavens revolve around it is seen to be no more than an argument over the choice of reference frames. There is no frame of reference from which an observer would not see the effects of the flattening of the poles. Thus, in frame number 1, the Earth turns around while the sky is at rest. The centrifugal force is a consequence of the Earth's motion, uniform acceleration, relative to the heavens. This causes the flattening. In the latter frame, number 2, the sky rotates and the Earth stands still, while the centrifugal force should be understood as being an effect of the rotating heavens, which is generating a gravitational field that causes the flattening at the poles. The two explanations are equivalent, as there is an equivalence between inertial and gravitational mass. So, end quote. See, almost did it again. Very important quote there. Let's continue on. We're talking about the fixed Earth now, remember. This is from Martin Gardner. Quote, do the heavens revolve or does the Earth rotate? The question is meaningless. A waitress may just as sensibly ask a customer if he wanted ice cream on top of his pie or the pie placed under his ice cream. End quote. Very important quote here. Just, what are we at? 70 quotes now. I don't know what we're at. But whatever it is, are you starting to see what's going on here? They are identical systems. They're all just a model. We don't live on a model. Okay, we don't live in the geocentric model. We don't live in the Copernican model. We don't live in the heliocentric model. We live here on Earth. We live in reality. And yet these guys have devised a way of explaining the world by giving you, all these distances, and that the Earth is just a tiny little speck. Even in the solar system, the Earth occupies 0.0000001% of the entire solar system, let alone if you look at the universe. And in my opinion, the Earth is all there is. So they've taken something that is 100% of importance and diminished it to 0.00001% of even the solar system. Who did that? Men with a worldview that say we cannot be the center, even though I'm reading quote after quote after quote after quote that says it's the same no matter what. So what are we doing teaching our children of the worldview of some men who hate God, their creator? Come on. Let's continue. Douglas C. Giaconoli said, quote, this null result was one of the greatest puzzles of physics at the end of the 19th century. One possibility was that the velocity would be zero and no fringe should be expected, but this implies that the Earth is somehow a preferred object. Only with respect to the Earth would the speed of light be c as predicted by Maxwell's equations. This is tantamount to assuming that the Earth is the central body of the universe. Again, no comment needed, just more quotes from physicists that are telling you that the evidence shows us to be in the center. Here we go. We've got Fred Hoyle in his Copernicus book again. Quote, let it be understood at the outset that it makes no difference from the point of view of describing planetary motion whether we take the Earth or the Sun as the center of the solar system, since the issue is one of relative motion only. There are infinitely many exactly equivalent descriptions referred to different centers. In principle, any single point will do. The Moon, Jupiter. So the passions loosed on the world by the publication of Copernicus's book De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium were logically irrelevant. End quote. Again, were logically irrelevant. Let's go on. Bernard Cohen, quote, there is no planetary observation by which we on Earth can prove that the Earth is moving in an orbit around the Sun. Thus, all Galileo's discoveries can be accommodated to the system in which the daily rotation of the heavens is communicated to the Sun and the planets so that the Earth itself neither rotates nor revolves in an orbit, end quote. Again, it might be getting annoying for some people. I'm sorry, I'm just putting these all together. Don't kill the messenger. It's going to be quote after quote after quote. We might be, I don't know, maybe we're more than half done, I hope. Let's see here. Fred Hoyle. Quote, we know that the difference between a heliocentric theory and a geocentric theory is one of relative motion only, and that such a difference has no physical significance, end quote. I mean, folks, what do you not see the problem yet? I'm not making these things up. That's what these guys are saying. If you want to believe them, if you want your children to learn the worldview of Fred Hoyle and the worldview of Einstein and these guys who hated the idea of being a creation, that's fine. That's fine. You can believe that if you want. For me, I think every human deserves to at least hear these things so that maybe they can change their worldview, maybe they can change their belief system. And I know it's hard. I'm one who knows how hard it is because we were all sat in a desk and handed prepackaged answers from teachers that we respected teachers that we believed. Our parents told us that we were going to school to learn, and so every one of us sat there and did exactly what we were supposed to do. Learned the answers for the test. That's what we did. If you want to believe those things are true, even after everything I'm reading to you, it's on you. Let's go to the next one. Fred Hoyle again. Today we cannot say the Copernican theory is right and the Ptolemaic theory is wrong in any meaningful sense. The two theories are physically equivalent to one another. Science today is locked into paradigms. Every avenue is blocked by beliefs that are wrong. And if you try and get anything published in a journal today, you will run up against a paradigm and the editors will turn you down. End quote. Unbelievable quote right there. That's what we've all been saying. People say, well, why is there no papers about this in the science journals? Well, why don't you ask Fred Hoyle? He'll tell you right there. Science today is locked into paradigms. Every single avenue is blocked by beliefs that are wrong. And if you try and get anything published in a journal today, you will run up against a paradigm and the editors will turn you down. Lincoln Barnett, quote, no physical experiment ever proved that the earth is actually in motion, end quote. I don't know what else I need to tell you about that one. Let's continue. Albert Michelson, quote, this conclusion directly contradicts the explanation which presupposes that the earth moves, end quote. Beautiful. Next one, from a book cited in Stephen Hawking's A Stubbornly Persistent Illusion, 2007, quote, to the question of whether or not the motion of Earth in space can be made perceptible in terrestrial experiments, we have already remarked that all attempts of this nature led to a negative result. Before the theory of relativity was put forward, it was difficult to become reconciled to this negative result, end quote. I mean, well, boy, folks, what else do you want to see? What else do you want to see? Think of what science is. They're doing a bunch of tests, experiments, to prove that the earth moves. Then he says, we have already remarked that all attempts of this nature have led to a negative result, meaning all scientific tests and experiments have proven that the earth does not move. Then he says, before the theory of relativity was put forward, it was difficult to become reconciled with this negative result. Again, go back and listen to me talk about the transform equations, which are what were employed in the special relativity theories. So now we have to believe that testing apparatuses are shrinking. Oh boy. Thank you, Einstein, for the theory of relativity, because this theory, that's real good science. The theory of relativity, great science for your mental conceptions. Kitty Ferguson, quote, it is possible to describe the entire universe using any chosen point as the unmoving center. The Earth will do very well, and no one can prove that choice is wrong. Scientists today prefer to picture everything in motion and nothing as being the center. If you haven't given much thought to the implications of 20th century science, you may be chagrined to realize that because of the concept of relative motion, no one can prove that the Earth moves. End quote. I don't know what you want me to say. Is it getting to be just too heavy on your shoulders yet? Because that's what happened to me. It got to be too much. It's too much. When you realize that we're dealing with the worldview of men who are forcing their beliefs on you and your children, your grandchildren, then you might start to wake up. I think I skipped too far. What did I do here? Sorry, I lost myself. Here we go. Excuse me. Thomas S. Kuhn here says, quote, ironically, the holy grail of many an astronomer to prove that the Earth is in fact revolving in a wide orbit around the Sun is claimed by this author to be stellar parallax, which is adequately explained in a neotychonic geocentric system with the stars aligned on the Sun, which revolves around the stationary Earth. Now imagine that the whole mechanism is picked up and put down again with the Sun fixed at the central position formerly held by the Earth. All of the geometric spatial relations to the Earth, Sun, and Mars are preserved, and since only the fixed point of the mechanism has changed, all the relative motions must be identical. The Tychonic system is transformed to the Copernican system simply by holding the Sun fixed instead of the Earth. The relative motion of the planets are the same in both systems, and the harmonies are therefore preserved, end quote. Again, I put that quote back in there. You might recognize this part, but maybe not this part. The reason I claim or put this later is because I wanted to show that he's talking about, as we spoke about earlier, when people say, oh, but the parallax of the stars, what you don't realize is they've already tested this and they're identical. It's the same. So keep coming with those arguments and you just look to be more of a religious zealot than before. Let's continue. Arthur Eddington, quote, there was just one alternative. The Earth's true velocity through space might happen to have been nil, end quote. If you don't know what nil means, it means zero. None. Zip. Sorry. Let's go to the next one. G.J. Whitrow, 1959 book, says, quote, "It is both amusing and instructive to speculate on what might have happened if such an experiment as Michelson-Morley could have been performed in the 16th or 17th centuries when men were debating the rival merits of Copernicus and the Ptolemaic systems. The result would surely have been interpreted as conclusive evidence for the immobility of the Earth, and therefore as a triumphant vindication of the Ptolemaic system and irrefutable falsification of the Copernican hypothesis. The moral of this historical fantasy is that it is often dangerous to believe in the absolute verification or falsification of a scientific hypothesis. All judgments of this type are necessarily made in some historical context, which may be drastically modified by the changing perspective of human knowledge," end quote. Again, beautiful quote there, well said, and if you understand it, you'll realize that if the test that they did in the early 1900s, late 1800s, was done back in the days when people were questioning Copernicus, they would have trashed the Copernican model at its outset. Would have been gone. Would have been easily proven, but they weren't able to test that. And so those tests came along after they had already accepted scientifically all of Copernicus's ideas. So do you think they're going to go back and admit they were wrong in the face of everything that happened with the church? Come on. Absolutely not. Let's move on to the next one. This is from Darcy Pettyhoff. She is at the Royal Air Force College in England. Quote, "One can of course believe anything one likes as long as the consequences of that belief are trivial. But when survival depends on belief, then it matters that beliefs correspond to manifest reality. We therefore teach navigators that the stars are fixed to a celestial sphere, which is centered on a fixed earth, and around which it rotates in accordance with the laws clearly deducible from common sense observation. The sun and the moon move across the inner surface of this sphere, and hence, perforce, go around the earth. This means that students of navigation must unlearn a lot of the confused dogma they learned in school. Most of them find this remarkably easy, because dogma is as it may be, but the real world is as we perceive it to be. If Andrew Hill will look into the Journal of Navigation, he will find that the Earth-centered universe is alive and well, whatever his readings of The Spectator may suggest," end quote. Beautiful quote here by somebody telling you, I don't know if she's a teacher at this college, but she's telling you, just come and look. We teach navigators that the Earth is fixed. We teach them that it's centered and that everything goes around us. That's what they teach. So for people to say, well, the geocentricity nonsense and Earth-centered nonsense, well, why is it being taught to Air Force pilots? Come on. James A. Coleman, quote, "The easiest explanation was that the Earth was fixed in the ether and that everything else in the universe moved with respect to the Earth and to the ether. Such an idea was not considered seriously, since it would mean, in effect, that our Earth occupied the omnipotent position in the universe with all other heavenly bodies paying homage by moving around it," end quote. I believe I already read that one. I knew that would happen somewhere. Too many quotes to go through and see if I had them matched up. All right, here we go. Next one. Quote, "The ancient argument over whether the earth rotates or the heavens revolve around it, as Aristotle taught, is seen to be no more than an argument over the simplest choice of a frame of reference. Obviously, the most convenient choice is the universe. Nothing except inconvenience prevents us from choosing the earth as a fixed frame of reference. If we choose to make the earth our fixed frame of reference, we do not even do violence to everyday speech. We say that the sun rises in the morning, sets in the evening. The Big Dipper revolves around the North Star. Which point of view is correct? Do the heavens revolve, or does the earth rotate? The question is meaningless," end quote. Martin Gardner, 1976 book. Again, if the question is meaningless, why is it that if I ask any scientist or any atheist or any science backer, hey, do we go around the sun or does the sun go around us? They will laugh at you. Lawrence Krauss has, I don't remember where it was it in one of my videos, where Lawrence Krauss makes a joke to a crowd about how insane it is that what people believe that the sun goes around the earth. Well, then what am I reading? What are these quotes? They're nothing? They're just meaningless? No. The question is meaningless of whether the heavens rotate because it's all the same. But again, what is being taught? What is being forced down your throat at 6 years old? You tell me. All right, let's go on to the next one. This is Luka Popov again. Quote, "Abstract, using Mach's principle, we will show that the observed diurnal and annual motion of the Earth can just as well be accounted for as the diurnal rotation and annual revolution of the universe around the fixed and centered Earth. This can be performed by postulating the existence of vector and scalar potentials caused by the simultaneous motions of masses in the universe, including the distant stars." End quote. Let's go here. Adolf Baker. Quote, "Always the speed of light was precisely the same. Thus, the failure of the Michelson-Morley to observe different speeds of light at different times of the year suggested that the Earth must be at rest. It was therefore the preferred frame for measuring absolute motion in space. Yet we have known since Galileo that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Why should it be at rest in space?" End quote. Okay, let's see here. Quote by Martin Gardner here. Quote, "One could just as legitimately assume that the Earth to be fixed and the entire universe within its great spherical cloud of black-body radiation to be moving. The equations are the same. Indeed, from the standpoint of relativity, the choice of reference frame is arbitrary. Naturally, it is simpler to assume the universe is fixed and the Earth moving, other than the other way around, but the two ways of talking about the Earth's relative motion are two ways of saying the same thing." End quote. I don't know how many more you need to hear, but we're going to keep reading. Let's go. Ronald W. Clark, in his book from 1971, quote, "The problem which now faced science was considerable, for there seemed to be only three alternatives. The first was that the Earth was standing still, which meant scuttling the whole Copernican theory, and was unthinkable." I'll end the quote there because we've already read this one, but again, let's move on here. Next one. Lorentz's 1886 paper, quote, "Briefly, everything occurs as if the Earth were at rest." End quote. Next one. Henry Poincaré, quote, "A great deal of research has been carried out concerning the influence of Earth's movement. The results were always negative. We do not have any means of discovering whether or not we are carried along in a uniform motion of translation." All right. That is all my fixed Earth quotes. We're moving on to the axis of evil. Hopefully you know what that is. I don't know if you do or don't. If you don't know what it is, then you haven't watched the movie The Principle. You need to watch that, check it out, just so you can see exactly what is the axis of evil. And that is the fact that when they look at the cosmic microwave background, which they say is the energy being emitted from the furthest reaches that we can see, which is, of course, putting us at the center again, they found that it lines up with the Earth. Well, wait a second. If we're just a random speck in the middle of everything, how could the outer edges of the universe line up with the Earth? Doesn't make any sense. So let's read about that. We got astrophysicist Ashok Singhal. Quote, "The apparent alignment in the cosmic microwave background in one particular direction through space is called evil because it undermines our ideas about the standard cosmological model. The Copernican principle seems to be in jeopardy." End quote. Very, very important. Let's go to the next one. Astrophysicist Dragan Hutterer. Quote, "Why is the solar system cosmically aligned? Nobody can explain." End quote. Nobody can explain that one. Let's go with the next one. This is from the following source here, if you want to type that in, so if you want to see where I got it from. Let's see here. Quote, "We found something very bizarre. There is some extra, so far unexplained structure in the cosmic microwave background. We had expected that the microwave background would be truly isotropic, with no preferred direction in space, but that may not be the case. The octupole and quadrupole components are arranged in a straight line across the sky, along a kind of cosmic equator. That's weird. We don't think this is due to the foreground contamination," Dr. Tegmark said. "It could be telling us something about the shape of the space on the largest scales. We did not expect this, and we cannot yet explain it." End quote. Yeah, they didn't expect it because it goes against the Copernican principle. They observe it, and so now they're busy right now. If you go into the office of Max Tegmark, they're busy trying to figure out a way that they can now explain away why the cosmic microwave background is aligned to the Earth. Because again, it places the Earth at the prime importance, centrality, and it's of the most importance. You got this quote here, and you can, again, click this link, or not click it, but you'll have to type it in. Quote, "If the universe does contain such an axis, it would contradict our current views of the cosmos, which assumes that matter and energy are uniformly distributed throughout, and that the universe looks pretty much the same in all directions. A similar bias among structures of cosmic proportions would have deep implications. For example, if more galaxies are spinning one way than the other, this implies that the universe has a net spin or angular momentum in a particular direction. Since angular momentum can neither be created or destroyed, the universe must have come into existence in a spin. Well, what set it spinning, though? And what is it spinning relative to?" End quote. Let's go with this one. This is Y. Tomozawa. Quote, "In the Friedman universe, one possible interpretation of the coordinates is that the whole space is on the surface of an expanding balloon and has no center. But in such a universe, there is no cosmic microwave background dipole, even in the presence of a peculiar velocity. In other words, the observation of a cosmic microwave background dipole excludes such an interpretation of the coordinates of the Friedman universe." End quote. Extremely important. Again, is there a violation of the Copernican principle in radio sky? Again, this is Ashok Singhal. Quote, "There is no denying that from the large anisotropies present in the radio sky, independently seen both in the discrete source distribution and in the diffuse cosmic microwave background, the Copernican principle again seems to be in jeopardy. Quote, end quote. This is Joseph Silk, University of California. Quote, studies of the cosmic background radiation have confirmed the isotropy of the radiation or its complete uniformity in all directions. If the universe possesses a center, we must be very close to it. Otherwise, excessive observable anisotropy in the radiation intensity would be produced, and we would detect more radiation from one direction than from the opposite direction, end quote. Again, I put that one in there for the importance of telling you if the universe possesses a center, then we must be very close to it. Okay? Which is against everything that the Copernican model said. Go back and listen to me talk about the Copernican model again. How about physicist Lawrence Krauss? Everybody knows him. When he's not busy doing things with women that he shouldn't, maybe he's got more quotes like this. Let's see. Quote, but when you look at the CMB map, you also see that the structure that is observed is in fact, in a weird way, correlated with the plane of the Earth around the sun. Is this Copernicus coming back to haunt us? That's crazy. We're looking at the whole universe. That would say we are truly at the center of the universe, end quote. That's Lawrence Krauss. That's from the movie The Principle. You can watch him say it for yourself if you go check out that movie. This is from Rick Delano, who's the co-producer of The Principle. I just wanted to read a quote that I found of his. Let's see what he's got to say. So he says, remember to tilt the ecliptic 23.5 degrees since the Earth is not tilted in the geocentric model. The cosmos is, and interestingly enough, it is tilted exactly on the angle built into the CMB, the largest visible structure in the cosmos. Please try and understand, there is one and only one cosmological model that would have predicted a cosmological significance to this 23.5 angle of the ecliptic. It is the geocentric model. In the heliocentric model, this 23.5 degree angle is ascribed to a tilt in the Earth's axis. In other words, it is a purely local phenomenon, not expected to have any cosmological significance at all. In this specific observation, it is the geocentric model which proves to have a better predictive fit to large-scale cosmological observations. This will help you understand why this astonishing alignment with the ecliptic and the equinoxes of the Earth is described as the axis of evil. Evil why? Evil because there should be no possible reason to expect an alignment of the universe's largest structure with supposedly the insignificant Earth, or if you prefer, supposedly insignificant local solar system. Unless, of course, you are already a geocentrist, in which case the alignment is very interesting confirmation that this angle is not merely local, but is cosmological in significance, end quote. Rick Delano. All right, so that's on the axis of evil. We are moving quite along. I don't think there's very many more quotes left. But now we're going to talk about dark energy and dark matter. There's only 3 quotes here. Let's get to those. This is from a report of the Dark Energy Task Force in 2006. You can type in this if you want to find that quote particularly. Quote, dark energy appears to be the dominant component of the physical universe, yet there is no persuasive theoretical explanation for its existence or magnitude. The acceleration of the universe is, along with dark matter, the observed phenomenon that most directly demonstrates that our theories of fundamental particles and gravity are either incorrect or incomplete. Most experts believe that nothing short of a revolution in our understanding of fundamental physics will be required to achieve a full understanding of the cosmic acceleration. For these reasons, the nature of dark energy ranks among the very most compelling of all outstanding problems in physical science. These circumstances demand an ambitious, observable program to determine the dark energy properties as well as possible, end quote. Again, so much is said in that quote that basically everything that they believe is wrong. Go back and listen to Michio Kaku tell you how far off they are, and then this guy is telling you right now that the acceleration of the universe, along with dark matter, that the observed phenomenon that most directly demonstrates that the theories of the fundamental particles and gravity are either incorrect or incomplete. But again, as I've told you many times, they can't get rid of gravity. Gravity is what makes the Earth a sphere. So they're not going to do away with that, even though it doesn't match observations. Gravity works maybe in the solar system if you're talking Newtonian, but outside that, it all falls apart. But yet they keep it, and they put in dark energy and dark matter to fix the issues. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the very definition of pseudoscience. It's exactly it. There's no other thing you need to hear to prove that. All right, let's read this. I can't read this guy's name, but we'll just read the quote. Quote, we now have increasing direct evidence that dark matter does not exist in galaxies. Then it is unlikely that some dark matter is hidden somewhere else in the universe. Therefore, the widely accepted cosmic microwave background cosmology is in difficulty. For this reason, it is worthwhile to reconsider the expansion in the universe by starting from scratch. Our result has the merit that it does not contain hypothetical stuff, end quote. I mean, what do you think about that? Phew. I don't know what to tell you. It's just telling you that everything that they believe is in difficulty, and it's time to reconsider the expansion of the universe by starting from scratch. But they are, you don't understand. It's fact. The universe is expanding. That's a fact. That's what's being taught in school. It's being taught to your children. It's being proposed as scientific. Pseudoscience. Let's go to the next one. This is by Craig J. Copey and a few other people here. Quote, according to the standard concordance model of cosmology, over 95% of the energy content of the universe is extraordinary, dark matter, or dark energy, whose existence has been inferred from the failure of the standard model of particle physics plus general relativity to describe the behavior of the astrophysical systems larger than a stellar cluster, while the very homogeneity and isotropy and inhomogeneity of the universe owe to the influence of an inflation field whose particle physics identify as completely mysterious even after 3 decades of theorizing. Testing the cosmological principle should be one of the key goals of modern observational cosmology, end quote. Sorry, I muffed that one up a little bit, but the important part here is the end one again, that we're all wrong. They're all wrong. Okay, they admit it. But they have to hold on to it so dearly because it's their worldview. And all these things are explaining, again, all this talk about dark matter, 95% of the world. Remember what I read earlier. Go back and look again at all the quotes that said that dark matter is not needed if the Earth is central. So the only reason they need it is because, everything's expanding and it's flying away too fast, and we need it to expand because we're on a balloon. And we're on a balloon because we can't be the center, and who's blowing it up? We don't really know. And why do we don't see spatial curvature even though we're on a balloon? Well, I don't know. It's just nonsense. Just nonsense. All right, let's move on to Newtonian physics. I think I just have a few. I think I called them Newtonian physics, but really they're just Newton's quotes, I believe, but I could be wrong. Let me close up some of these boxes because they're getting a little annoying. Let me go up here. If you guys don't use OneNote, man, if you're a researcher and you're not using OneNote, I don't know what to tell you. It's a beautiful little program. It's free, by the way. All right, so this is Frank Wilczek, professor of physics at MIT, Nobel Prize winner, 2004. Okay, quote, Newtonian laws operate in a world model that is very different from everyday intuition. Because Newtonian space is infinite and homogeneous, Earth and its surface are not special places. The directions up, down, and sideways are fundamentally similar. Nor is rest privileged over uniform motion. None of these concepts matches everyday experience. They troubled Newton's contemporaries and even Newton himself, end quote. Okay? So he tells you all these things are so weird and so against everything that we know to be true, and they bothered Newton. How do we know it bothered Newton? Let's read this quote. This is Isaac Newton to Bentley. Again, if you go back and listen to Globebusters this past week, I believe Eru put up a link to this exact letter. You can actually see it written in the hand of Newton. And what did he say? Very important quote. Quote, it is inconceivable that inanimate brute matter should, without the mediation of something else which is not material, operate upon and affect other matter without mutual contact, as it must do if gravitation, in the sense of Epicurus, be essential and inherent in it. And this is one reason why I desired that you would not ascribe innate gravity to me, that gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, so that one body can act upon another at a distance through a vacuum without the mediation of anything else, by and through which their action and force may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great an absurdity that I believe that no man who has in philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. Gravity must be caused by an agent acting constantly according to a certain law, but whether this agent be material or immaterial, I have left that to be consideration of my readers, end quote. What a quote here for all those people out there. If you're listening to this now and you believe in gravity and you believe in Newtonian physics, you would tell me, right? You would say, oh, well, mass attracts mass. The sun attracts the earth, and the earth attracts the moon, and the moon pulls our water, and gravity holds you down, and gravity holds the ocean upside down on the globe. We hear all these things about gravity, right? You can believe those all you want. What did Newton say about it? It is inconceivable that inanimate brute matter, okay, which is what two things of mass are, without the mediation of something else which is not material, operate upon and affect other matter without mutual contact, as it must do if gravitation in the sense of Epicurus be essential and inherent in it. And this is the reason, he's saying, and this is the reason why I desired that you would not ascribe that to me. I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to say that I came up with gravity. that gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, which is what we're taught, which is what we're told. Mass attracts mass. They have a little test. We have Cavendish in his shed showed that mass attracts mass. Well, what did Newton say about that? We're reading that gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, so that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum without the mediation of something else, by and through which their action and force may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great of an absurdity that I believe that no man who has philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. Guess what, folks? The whole world fell into it. Isaac Newton from his Optics, 1730. Quote, may not planets and comets and all gross bodies perform their motions more freely and with less resistance in this ethereal medium than in any fluid which fills all space adequately without leaving any pores, and by consequence is much denser than quicksilver and gold? And may not its resistance be so small as to be inconsiderable? For instance, if this ether, for so I will call it, should be supposed 700,000 times more elastic than our air and above 700,000 times more rare, its resistance would be above 600 million times less than that of water, and so small a resistance would scarce make any sensible alteration in the motions of the planets in 10,000 years, end quote. Isaac Newton, Proposition 43, very important one here, quote, in order for the Earth to be at rest in the center of the system of the sun, planets, and comets, there is required both universal gravity and another force in addition that acts on all bodies equally accordingly to the quantity of matter in each of them, and is equal and opposite to the accelerative gravity with which the Earth tends to the sun. Since this force is equal and opposite to its gravity towards the sun, the Earth can truly remain in equilibrium between these two forces and be at rest. And thus celestial bodies can move around the Earth at rest as in the Tychonic system. End quote. Oh, I thought Newton proved that, oh boy. But these guys are just admitting to you right there. But again, like everyone else after him, that's absurd. It's the absolute horror of a unique position. A lot of cosmology is trying to hide things. How many quotes have we read? Let's move on to relativity. We've only got 3 more little topics, and I don't think they have very many quotes. Let's see if I can pull up how many we have left. We have maybe 15 quotes left. All right. We're on to relativity. This is from a University of Illinois Physics 319, a lecture, page 8. Quote, it is often said that Tycho's model implies the absence of parallax and that Copernicus's requires parallax. However, it would not be a major conceptual change to have the stars orbit the sun, like the planets for Tycho, which would give the same yearly shifts in their apparent positions as parallax gives. Thus, if parallax were observed, a flexible Tychonian could adjust the theory to account for it without undue complexity. What if parallax were not observed? For Copernicus, only one requires that the stars be far enough away for parallax to be unmeasurable. Therefore, the presence or absence of parallax doesn't force the choice of one type of model over the other. If different stars were to show different amounts of parallax, that would rule out the possibility of them being on one sphere, but still not really decide between Tycho and Copernicus. In fact, if we don't worry about distant stars, these two models describe identical relative motions of all objects in the solar system, so the role of observation is not to direct as you might have guessed. There is no bare observation that can distinguish whether Tycho, taken broadly, or Copernicus, taken broadly, is right. End quote. Again, go look at all the videos of people telling you that geocentrism cannot be right because of the parallax of the stars, and then refer them to this lecture from the physics course, University of Illinois. Next, light velocity dependent on the speed of source. This is from the New Scientist in 1962. Quote, according to the second postulate of Einstein's special theory of relativity, the speed of light is independent of the uniform motion of its source. Direct experimental evidence by W. Cantor of the U.S. Navy Electronics Laboratory, San Diego, leads him to the surprising conclusion that it may be untenable. End quote. Then we've got, you can actually find this right here if you want. This is a link to this particular test that says that it's untenable. Okay. Now we're going to start a quote again from the New Scientist. If Einstein's postulate is correct, there should be no displacement between the two sets of interference fringes on spinning the disk, because the light from the approaching and receding windows, respectively, should all have the same velocity. In fact, an unambiguous, easily noted shift of the fringes was apparent when the mirrors were in motion, maximum linear velocity 4,690 centimeters per second, and Cantor deduces that the Einstein second postulate is incorrect. The fringe shift, moreover, appeared to depend on the speed of the disk. If the present work turns out, on more rigorous research, to be flawless and free from experimental artifacts, and if there is no obvious alternative explanation for the observed effects, there may be a need to reconsider some basic ideas in physics. End quote. Hugely important there. Let's continue on. We're talking relativity here. The New Mechanics, Henry Poincaré, 1913. Quote, examined more closely, this simple idea requires capital importance. There is no way of settling the question. No experiment can disprove the principle that there is no absolute space. All displacements we can observe are relative displacements. I have often had occasion to express these considerations so familiar to philosophers. They have given me a publicity I would gladly have avoided. All the reactionary French journals have made me prove that the sun turns round the earth. In the famous case between the Inquisition and Galileo should be all wrong. End quote. Unbelievable. Let's continue on. We got Max Born here. By the way, here's a little factoid for you, for those guys looking for little facts. Max Born, Olivia Newton-John's grandfather. For whatever that's worth, I don't know. This is the kind of knowledge you come across when you're reading too much and it's just stupid knowledge that nobody would ever need to know. But I felt very selfish for keeping that to myself. So now everybody knows. So there you go. Quote, thus, we may return to Ptolemy's point of view of a motionless Earth. One has to show that the transform metric can be regarded as produced according to Einstein's field equations by distant rotating masses. This has been done by Thuring. He calculated a field due to a rotating, hollow, thick-walled sphere and proved that inside the cavity it behaved as though there were a centrifugal and many other inertial forces, usually attributed to absolute space. Thus, from Einstein's point of view, Ptolemy and Copernicus are equally right. End quote. Let's move on again. Again, that's the whole theory of relativity, right? Steven Weinberg, quote, if we were to adopt a frame of reference like Tycho's in which the Earth is at rest, then the distant galaxies would seem to be executing circular turns once a year. And in general relativity, this enormous motion would create forces akin to gravitation, which would act on the sun and planets and give them the motions of the Tychonic theory. Newton seems to have had a hint of this. In an unpublished Proposition 43 that did not make it into the Principia, Newton acknowledges that Tycho's theory could be true if some other force besides ordinary gravitation acted on the sun and planets. End quote. I totally forgot to mention that. The quote that I read from Newton, which was... do I have it here? Hold on. This one. No. This one. Nope. This one. Nope. This one. Nope. Oh, it was in the Newtonian one. Sorry, I'm going to go back up here. I want to just bring this quote back into play. Where's the proposition? Yep, Proposition 43. This one, by the way, did not make it into the Principia. Why do you think? What? I mean, this is the whole point of this video. They're hiding things from you. Didn't make it into his book because they don't want him saying that. Don't tell him that the Earth can be still. We're trying to prove something different here. So it didn't make it in. Anyway, back to relativity. We were here, and then we went here. There we go. That's talking about the Proposition 43 we just read. All right. Next, we got C. Moeller, page 113 from his book of 1972, Theory of Relativity. Quote, Einstein advocated a new interpretation of the fictitious forces in accelerated systems of reference. The fictitious forces were treated as real forces on the same footing as any other force of nature. The reason for this occurrence in accelerated systems of reference for such peculiar forces should, according to this new idea, be sought in circumstance that the distant masses of fixed stars are accelerated relative to these systems of reference. The fictitious forces are thus treated as a kind of gravitational force, the acceleration of distant masses causing a field of gravitation in the system of reference considered. Only when we work in special systems of reference, systems of inertia, it is not necessary to include the distant masses in our considerations, and this is the only point which distinguishes the systems of inertia from other systems of reference. It can, however, be assumed that all systems of reference are equivalent with respect to the formulation of the fundamental law of physics. This is the so-called general principle of relativity. End quote. All right, let's move on to speak about the ether. We're down to maybe, 15 quotes. Is that what I said last time? Then I probably lied. All right, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 14. Here we go. Talking about the ether, this is Albert Einstein's book here, as cited in Einstein and the Ether by Ludwig Kostro, 2000. In 1905, I was of the opinion that I was no longer allowed to speak about the ether in physics. This opinion, however, was too radical. As we will see later when we discuss the general theory of relativity, it does remain allowed, as always, to introduce a medium filling all space and to assume that the electromagnetic fields, as matter as well, are in states, once again, empty. Space appears as endowed with physical properties, i.e., and no longer as physicalness empty, as seemed to be the case according to special relativity. One can thus say that the ether is resurrected in the general theory of relativity. Since the new theory, metric facts can no longer be separated from true physical facts. The concepts of space and ether merge together. End quote. Hugely important. Again, go to any scientist and ask them if the ether exists. They'll laugh you out of the building even though Einstein says right here it still exists. Let's go to the next one. This is from S. Saunders and H.R. Brown. Quote, today the vacuum is recognized as a rich physical medium. A general theory of the vacuum is thus a theory of everything. A universal theory, it would be appropriate to call the vacuum ether once again. End quote. Again, these things aren't being taught. They're scared to death of the ether. Let's continue. Ludwig Kostro. We already read this book. Is this the same? No. Quote, modern science has its roots in ancient Greek philosophy. This philosophy, as we know, used the word ether to designate the particular kind of matter that fills the universe. This term was used throughout the history of philosophy and science, and it was also current at the beginning of this century. A resumption of its use at the dawn of this new century is now a fact, since according to the general theory of relativity and other modern branches of physics, the space and time of the universe do not constitute a vacuum, but a structured material plenum characterized by different physical quantities. The historical and traditional word ether is the most appropriate to express these features of the universe, end quote. So, just showing you how much things change as we move along, and yet you'll still be laughed at if you mention the ether. Quote, according to accepted theory, free space is a vacuum. If this is so, how can it exhibit impedance? But it does. The answer, of course, is that there is no such thing as a vacuum, and what we call free space has structure. The impedance equals 376 plus ohms. End quote. Frank Wilczek says, prior to the 20th century, physics tried to explain how nature works. Over the 20th century, and especially in the last half, we got much more ambitious. Now we're uncovering what nature is. The foundation is an entity I call the grid. The grid fills space and is full of spontaneous activity. In some ways, it resembles the old idea of ether, but the grid is highly evolved ether. Ether on steroids, if you like, with many new features. We have some wonderful ideas waiting to be tested. There are good reasons to think that the universe is a multi-layered, multicolored superconductor, that all four known forces can be brought together in a unified theory, that seemingly hopelessly different kinds of matter are just different aspects of one all-embracing stuff. I anticipate that in the next few years, it will be a golden age in fundamental physics, end quote. Notice that we've got, this is the professor at MIT, 2004, and it's in a book from 2008. So we'll see. Is it going to be the golden age in fundamental physics when they have to redo everything that they've done? Again, the tightrope walker, afraid to look down. Don't want to look at that rope. Do not want to see how high up we are. That's how science must continue on. If they dare look down, they'll realize, whoa, we are way too high up, and then they'll get, their balance will go, and they'll fall off. So that's why you just look forward. You don't mention it. Neil deGrasse, go forward. Bill Nye, evolution. It's all true. I'm a cis male now, or there's no male or female anymore. It's just all a spectrum, and you just keep going forward. Don't look down at our foundations. Don't question what we've done to get here. It's ridiculous. Neil Ashby, quote, in the GPS, the Sagnac effect can produce discrepancies amounting to hundreds of nanoseconds. A Sagnac correction is needed to account for the diurnal motion of each receiver during signal propagation. In fact, one can use the GPS to observe the Sagnac effect. So look up the Sagnac experiment, understand the Sagnac effect. You'll understand that quote. Next, Ether and the Theory of Relativity by Albert Einstein, 1920, a talk at the University of Leiden. Quote, according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical quantities. In a sense, therefore, there exists an ether. According to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable, for in such space there would not only be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for standards of space and time, measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in the physical sense, end quote. This is Einstein telling you right there. And again, the point of this is not saying, oh, this is Einstein being right. This is for you to see their line of thinking. You can see how he just moves around and says, well, according to this theory, there is ether, but according to my other theory, there's not. Well, which one's true? It's these heliocentrists will pull out whatever they want. Oh, now it's a special theory of relativity. Now it's the general theory of relativity, but they are all untenable. Period. Let's continue. Robert B. Laughlin, 1993, Nobel Prize winner. Quote, the word ether has extremely negative connotations in theoretical physics because of its past association with opposition to relativity. This is unfortunate because stripped of those connotations, it rather nicely captures the way most physicists actually think about the vacuum. In the early days of relativity, the conviction that light must be waves of something ran so strong Einstein was widely dismissed. Even when Michelson and Morley demonstrated that the Earth's orbital motion through the ether could not be detected, opponents argued that the Earth must be dragging an envelope of ether along with it because relativity was lunacy and could not possibly be right. Relativity actually says nothing about the existence or non-existence of matter pervading the universe, only that such matter must have relativistic symmetry. It turns out that such matter exists. About the time relativity was becoming accepted, studies of radioactivity began showing that an empty vacuum of space had a spectroscopic structure similar to that of ordinary quantum solids and fluids. Subsequent studies with large particle accelerators have now led us to understand that space is more like a piece of window glass. How about that? Sorry, my bad. Didn't mean to interject there. Subsequent studies with large particle accelerators have now led us to understand that space is more like a piece of window glass than ideal Newtonian emptiness. It is filled with stuff that is normally transparent, but can be made visible by hitting it sufficiently hard to knock out a part. The modern concept of the vacuum of space, confirmed every day by experiment, is a relativistic ether, but we do not call it this because it's taboo. End quote. Again, I mean, come on. We don't call it the ether because it's taboo. This is the worldview of scientists. This is not real science. It is pseudoscience. Let's go to Luka Popov one more time. And we've got the recent paper, quote, the recent paper published in the European Journal of Physics aimed to demonstrate the kinematical and dynamical equivalence of the heliocentric and geocentric systems. The work is performed in the neo-Tychonic system with key assumptions that orbits of distant masses around the Earth are synchronized with the Sun's orbit. Motion of the Sun and Mars have been analyzed, and the conclusion was reached that the very fact of the accelerated motion of the universe as a whole produces the so-called pseudo-potential that not only explains the origin of pseudo-forces, but also the very motion of the celestial bodies as seen from a static Earth. After the paper was published, the question was raised if the same potential can explain the motion of distant stars that are not affected by the Sun's gravity, unlike Mars, and if it can be used to reproduce the observation of the stellar parallax. The answer is found to be positive. End quote. Wow. I don't know what to say. Now, the last one here, I have 4 more quotes left. We're down to 4. Isn't that exciting? I don't know how long we've been going. I'll check super chats in the chat in a second and see if people are just pissed. Like, dude, you are boring us to death, which may be true. But sometimes I do these videos for myself, too. I think it's great to have all these put in one place. It's a great video to send to somebody when they want to tell me how the spinning Earth is proven and the Earth cannot possibly be fixed and geocentricity makes no sense and the Earth cannot be central and we cannot be important. And I'll just show them the worldview of the people who taught them what they believe. And again, you can believe that. I don't care. You'll never catch me going to these other channels and making sock puppet accounts and going in and yelling at them and calling them morons. No, I just do my thing. I just tell people my side of the story from my channel. And there you go. Enjoy it. But again, there'll be a bunch of people in this chat, I'm sure right now. I don't have the chat up, but I'm sure there's trolls the entire time. This is what these people do. It's really sad. Sad. Why don't you just go make a channel and just talk to people like I do? You can tell them all about how retarded I am. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. And if you are hitting points and people like listening, yay, you'll grow a following. If not, well, then you'll probably be back in my chat yelling and screaming about how true atheism is and where's your proof of God, even though it's all around you, that kind of thing. All right. Now we're talking about the multiverse, and the reason this is funny is you have to imagine now that here's the problem with their line of thinking. That the Earth and this solar system, if you want to call it that, I believe that the Earth is all there is, but you can call it a solar system if you want to include the lights in the sky. Okay. All of that, to me, is of prime importance. I've already talked about that, correct? It is so fit for life. The solar system is so perfect. The Earth is so perfect for life. The way everything works in this universe is so dialed in for our existence and perfection and order and everything that we have in front of us, which is clearly a sign of design, but let's move away from that. They have a problem, and they say, wait a second, this couldn't have popped in from nothing. So what's their answer to it? The multiverse. That we just happen to be one of a bazillion multiverses, and this one happens to be situated for life, and that's why we're here. So again, this is the same belief of Lawrence Krauss. You can listen to him on Joe Rogan. Tell everybody that, excuse me, I'm going to get a drink of water here. Let's see here. In the meantime, I'll give you something to talk about. You can talk about yourselves here. Is Joe Rogan really 4'3"? Discuss. All right, I'm back. Okay, so hopefully you guys came to a conclusion there. I don't know if you did, but let's move on. So the multiverse is their explanation for this, and you have Lawrence Krauss talking to Joe Rogan saying, or no, it wasn't Lawrence Krauss, it was the other guy, Crime Box, who said, oh, well, if you have an infinite amount of monkeys with an infinite amount of typewriters, that eventually they would produce the works of Shakespeare. This is considered science. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? If anybody believes that nonsense, get out. Come on. It's just such a ridiculous, stupid joke of a hypothesis. And if there's not an infinite amount of monkeys. Well, if there's not an infinite amount of typewriters, there's not an infinite amount of space to put all that infinite amount. There's no infinity of nothing. Okay, infinity is the dumbest word I've ever heard. Infinity. Oh yeah, well, what about plus one? Well, it's an infinity. Well, what about plus one? Doesn't that become infinity? Well, then, yeah, that's infinity. Okay, now plus 10. How about that? Yeah, infinity, nonsense. But these are the kind of things that there has to be an infinite amount of universes. That's their explanation for why this universe that we're in is so fit for life. You know why? Because they're afraid to just say that it was created for us. Can you imagine being that black-hearted, that cold-hearted, that just disgusted with this perfect, beautiful earth that we've been given? That you're so disgusted by it. You say, no, it must be that we're just part of an accident and a billion trillion accidents, and that's why we're here. And we just got lucky to be in this one accidental accident. On accident. By accident. It's accidental. Nonsense. Let's read some multiverse nonsense here. This is George Ellis. Again, dark matter and dark energy proposals. Maintaining cosmology is a true science. Quote, however, the very nature of the scientific enterprise is at stake in the multiverse debate. The multiverse proponents are proposing weakening the nature of scientific proof in order to claim that multiverses provide a scientific explanation. This is a dangerous tactic. Note that we are concerned with really existing multiverses, not potential or hypothetical. Two central scientific virtues are testability and explanatory power. In the cosmological context, these are often in conflict with each other. The extreme case is multiverse proposals where no direct observational tests of the hypothesis are possible, as the supposed other universes cannot be seen by any observations whatever, and the assumed underlying physics is also untested and indeed probably untestable. In this context, one must reevaluate what the core of science is. Can one maintain one has genuine scientific theory when direct and indeed indirect tests of the theory are impossible? If one claims this, one is altering what one means by science. One should be very careful before doing so. End quote. Thank you, George Ellis, for being a rational mind in a world of nincompoops. Do not talk about a multiverse to explain why this universe is so perfect for life. It's ridiculous. It's got order. It's because it's designed. Just like everything else that you see out in the world. That airplane that you fly in, well, it flies so nicely because it's been designed with intelligence behind it. That's how things work. Okay, so when you look at this earth and the way it operates and the way that, if it was any colder or any hotter, or if we were any further from the sun or closer to the sun, or if the moon was closer, the oceans would go splash over us. And, it's perfectly situated for us. Look at the sun and moon. They're the same size in the sky. Do you know what the chances of that are? 1 in trillions. It's ridiculous. And it just so happens they're the same size in the sky. Oh, but one's 400 times further and one's 400 times as small. And believe what you want. It's here for a reason. We live here. We've been placed here. We've been given the gift of life for a reason. And they've taken that away from you by teaching you their worldview from day one. And anybody out there that's listening to me right now that feels like they hate me or feels like they don't like what I'm saying, I feel bad. But at the same time, I just want you to recognize that I used to be you. Okay, I was you 4 years ago. So it's not difficult for me to understand where you're coming from. But I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. I just want you to see what I'm saying. Okay, I just want you to look carefully at what I'm trying to tell you. And again, you can take it however you want. But if you want to have your life decided by the worldview of men who hate the idea that we're here for a reason, that hate the idea, despise the idea. It's the absolute horror of a unique position. Go back and listen to this video. Look at the quotes. These guys despise the fact that all observations tell us we're the center of the earth or the center of the universe. Everything revolves around us. Okay? And you might call that, well, that's really, I'd rather be like Stephen Hawking, who's modest, Jaron. You're not very modest by saying everything rotates around us. Oh, sorry, I'm just going by the observations. I'm assuming that if that's where we were put, then we should know that. Every human deserves to know it. And it's been hidden from you, it's been hidden from me, and now I'm trying to reveal it. Wrong or right? That's what I'm doing. Let's continue. Quote, but the main reason for believing in an ensemble of universes is that it could explain why the laws governing our universe appear to be so finely tuned for our existence. This fine-tuning has two possible explanations. Either the universe was designed specifically for us by a creator, or there is a multitude of universes, a multiverse, end quote. And again, go back and read what Ellis just said when he tells you, if you get into that line of thinking, you've completely destroyed science. You've torn it down. It's gone. And I already believe that that's the case. That's the sad part about this all. They sit you in a desk in school and they teach you the scientific method. And there's nobody who hears that method and says anything other than, wow, did humans come up with that? Nice. That seems to work. That is the best way to get close to the truth. The scientific method seems well designed for us to get as close to the truth as we ever can. Okay? And then they start teaching you things in the same class. It still says science on the door. Same teacher. And all of a sudden they start teaching you, here's the globe. Here's us flying through space. And the sun is 867,000 miles wide and 93 million miles away. And they don't tell you that these things have not been decided by experimenting through the scientific method, that they're the worldview of a bunch of men who said, well, we must be going around the sun. How big does the sun have to be for us to go around it? 867,000 miles wide. Okay, it's 867,000 miles wide. All right, great. And how far would that put it? Well, that would put it 93 million miles wide. Okay, yeah, let's go with that. Because the alternative is scary as shit to them. So they just come up with these arbitrary numbers and throw the universe out there. And now we see the sun clearly going across the sky, clearly moving around you. Clearly it goes in its orbit around you. And I mean above you. But, it is around you. But anyway, and then imagine, go out and look at the sun tomorrow and just, I laugh every day. How can anybody believe that the sun is 867,000 miles wide? It's ridiculous. Have you ever flown in an airplane across the United States? That's what, 2,500 miles? But the sun is 867,000 miles wide. Okay, whatever you say. I mean, imagine standing in California and looking across and seeing New York. Can you imagine that? That's only 2,500 miles. But go look at the moon tonight. That's 250,000 miles. You can just see it right there. Easy to see. Let's go again here. We got Tim Folger, who said in Discover Magazine Online, quote, call it a fluke, a mystery, a miracle, or call it the biggest problem in physics. Short of invoking a benevolent creator, many physicists see only one possible explanation. Our universe must be one of perhaps infinitely many universes in an inconceivably vast multiverse. Most of those universes are barren, but some, like ours, have conditions suitable for life. The idea is controversial. Critics say it doesn't even qualify as a scientific theory because the existence of other universes cannot be proved or disproved, end quote. Yeah, you think there might be some people who have a problem with the theory that can't be proved or disproved or ever observed at all. But then again, those things are accepted now. Dark energy, dark matter, never been observed, but it makes up 97% of your universe, folks. Again, you want to believe these people? It's on you. Last but not least, yes, believe it or not, we are done. This is the final one. Dennis O'Leary, Evolution News and Views, quote, the Copernican principle is similarly flexible. When conjuring habitable planets, it assumes ours is one among countless winners. Yet when conjuring a multiverse, it assumes that our universe is a lonely winner among countless flops. The choice seems to depend on which assumption is required as a defense against design. That feature, as we shall see, can once again transform speculation into orthodoxy. End quote. So, that's all that I have. I think I went through each topic. I hope I did. Went through each topic. And this one here. Yep. We did, the prime importance quotes. We did Copernican principle quotes. We did experiments. We did centrality. We did fixed Earth. We did axis of evil. We did dark energy and matter, Newtonian physics, relativity, ether, and the multiverse. Quite a few. So I don't know if people enjoyed that or not. I'm going to check the, let's get you on something here so we can, we'll put that up. There we go. And I'm just going to check super chats. I don't think there was very many, but oh, there's a few. Thank you. Thanks for sharing, says Tina Baker. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Flat Earth Bear, bravo. All right, Bear. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you guys very much for those. Very much. Appreciate it. And let me check the chat to see if anybody wants to tell me how boring I was or whether they enjoyed it or something. Let's see here. Bring this up. So was that boring? Did anybody enjoy that? Oh, good. Some people said thank you. We want more. I got a lot more quotes, but they're not on that same subject, so I'll have to line up some other ones. Thanks for laying it all on the line. Sharon, very enlightening. Thanks. Good. Thanks so much. Oh, Iru, man, I bet you have so many more quotes than I do. You're the kind of researcher that, I'm sure stocks those things like I do. So yeah, Iru, check out his channel. You can click on, he's in the chat right now. He's also got a Nur for Everyone channel in English and a Nur para Todos channel in Spanish. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. The Earth is at the center. That's not the kind of thing one needs to be modest about unless one claims to be the creator. Wow, that's hard to read. That goes by fast. Thanks, Sharon. We'll reference this video. Thanks. Appreciate that. Awesome. Rick. I don't know. Rick keeps writing Jeranism. Thank you. I can see it. Yes. Killed it. Great. Awesome. Keep up the great work. Appreciate it, guys. Everybody's so awesome. I really appreciate everybody who watches. If you could, give me a like. Just go down there and hit that thumbs up. 856 watching now, but only half those people have liked it. Which, hey, if you don't like it, like I said, I knew that this was not going to be completely popular for those who have atheistic beliefs. I understand that. Hey, thank you so much. Not boring. Go Tycho Brahe. Yep, the guy was very observationally accurate. Jeranism. Thanks, Bob. Awesome. Bob sent me some gift packages today. I got some lenses for my P900, and it should be tomorrow that I get my P900 with the infrared, so I can't wait. Can't imagine how much work went into that. Thank you. Appreciate it. Just a lot of, well, yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever used OneNote, but yeah, I've got so many things in OneNote, it's ridiculous. And you can search it really easily, although I say that and sometimes I can't find things I know that are in there, so I don't know how well you can search them. But for the most part, it works. Let's see here. Love your stuff. Appreciate it. Is there any quotes by scientists that contradict those quotes? Great quotes, by the way. Well, yeah. I mean, well, I don't know what you mean by contradict. I'm trying to show the quotes that show their worldview. That when these tests proved, so yeah, if you ask somebody, hey, I heard these quotes that say that these tests, well, they're going to come back and they're going to give you formulas for the Lorentz contraction, and they're going to talk about length contraction and things that have never been proven. So you just have to keep asking them for the proof. Eventually, they'll run out. There is none. So, thank you, sirs. Thank you, Sooner Squatch. Appreciate that. And Rocky Burns, 619 guy 202. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. Good show. Thank you. I don't think we've been told the truth about everything from the beginning of technology age. That's why they broke up AT&T. Yeah, they certainly, I mean, there's so much lies out there. I mean, that's the one thing I hope people recognize is that if your government has lied to you on basically every single thing that there is, then isn't it the case that they would lie to you about a place you can't go? That they would lie to you about stuff you can't go and verify? It's ridiculous. You did your thing as usual, bro. Keep killing the ball. Yeah, it's just, I'm just trying to, like I said, I want people to at least have the opportunity to consider an alternative. And you know what? Like I've said it a million times, and I mean it with all sincerity. If you hear about flat Earth and you take the time to look into it and you come to the conclusion that it's nonsense, then that's yours. I don't mind that. That's okay. I mean, what are you going to do about it? Super helpful. Thank you. Story voice video. Appreciate that. Stretchy ladders. Yes. See Ride Straight. Thank you. I love people who comment on my past videos. It just tells me that you're not here for the first time. Plans for any non-flat Earth videos? Yeah, a lot. Actually, I have kind of this idea that I'm going to do some other videos on some other subjects. And I think it might actually help promote the flat Earth at this point, where if I do some video on another subject, maybe somebody subscribes to my channel, maybe they look at my channel for other videos, maybe they like the video I do on another subject. So I think it's a good thing to do. So yeah, I will be doing lots of videos. By the way, I am going to do a video probably, maybe not tomorrow, maybe the next day. But I just want to do a short video on the Foucault's pendulum and exactly what I talked about, because if you go to the Amazon one, you can buy one on Amazon for like $6,000, but in the description of it, there's a link to the PDF instruction manual. And in the instruction manual, it gives you all the things to troubleshoot if the thing is not swinging in the right direction, if it's swinging too fast or too slow, and you just got to do a little turn of the tangent screw. You got to adjust it so it spins right, and then guess what? Then it proves the spin of the Earth. So I just want to do a short video showing that, yeah, of course, if this is the kind of things that they call proof. Again, they start the thing swinging, and then you adjust the little screw, and you move the little magnet, and you adjust it for your location, and then all of a sudden, guess what, children? Come look at this. It proves that the Earth spins. With the little adjustment of the screw. Just one thing bugging me: oscillation is like scissor silent. Great video, by the way. Didn't catch that in time. Sorry. Let's see here. What else? Anything else? 67,000 miles around the sun. Yeah, very exciting, isn't it? Let's see here. Trying to remember if there's anything else I needed to cover tonight. I think that's it as far as quotes. But like I said, there's going to be a lot more quotes. So if you have some that I missed, like I said, I was trying to center around showing a worldview. I know I read some quotes twice. It was hard to kind of verify if I had them in there or not. And thought it was better to read them twice. Give hello, miss hugs and kisses. I will. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Science adjustmentalism. Yeah, great. Outstretched World. Awesome name. Love that. Excellent show from Down Under or Across. Yeah, I prefer Across. You're somewhere over there. Stars are above your head and mine. Let's see here. Kill Gory. Prove it. Prove what? I don't know what that means. But let's see here. The pendulum is a contradiction to enclosed atmosphere and moving with the Earth spinning. It just, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But again, they can pick and choose when they use certain things. They want to talk about Coriolis force, but they also tell us that the atmosphere is moving along with the Earth. It's like, wait a second. Hold on. If it's moving lockstep, what is causing this? It's just nonsense. Can you do a video on what you think the Space Force will bring? Sure, I'll just tell you right now, the Space Force will bring more people into the military. What better way to get people to sign up in the military than to, entice them with the idea of outer space? So exciting. I want to go to space. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be just like, all the Down Pettit, people like that. Let's see here. FE Foucault's Pendulum. There's a video there by Flat Earth. I'll check that out. I'm actually copying that. Copy. Thank you. Let's see here. How about they're just contrails? People need to see what's happening in our skies. Yeah, GM Skywatcher, I've seen that. Also, yeah, you can find tons of time lapses of people just time lapsing the day, and you can see these planes go by. They leave these streaks in the sky, and over the course of the next 3-4 hours, they spread out and become clouds. So, you can believe that that's just contrails if you want, but it's up to each person. Each person has their own space farce. I like that. Will bring more money into the hands of liars. Absolutely. Yep. Antarctica is also real. Okay. I don't disagree with that. Yeah, Antarctica is a place, and most people can go there. If you have $30,000, you can actually take a boat right to the edge there. The shoreline. So that's cool. A 2-hour excellent lecture. Wish I could afford this free education. Yeah, very free. And that's why I appreciate everyone who donates. And I can't say enough about patrons because they've helped me a ton. If it wasn't for them, with the YouTube censorship and the demonetization of all my videos, which is just ridiculous, or not all of them, but I mean a vast majority. If you put anything controversial in the title, there's a lot of things I could have called this video, but I kind of reword it. In fact, if you look at some of the things I've been doing, I don't know if people can see the tags, but in this video, there's not the tag for Flat Earth. It's not there. I don't dare do it now. I try and go around it. So hopefully they don't realize that that's what a lot of my stuff on my show is about. You got to show up on the debates one of these days, bro. Awesome. Chocolate saying, yeah, I should. You guys do them too early, man. It's way too early. And I think it's getting a little bit easier to figure out what's going on. But right now it's kind of hard. Scuba Dracula, what's up, man? It was nice meeting you last time I saw you. Awesome. Adam Wesley, this was very informational and interesting. I know a decent amount about where we truly live. There is so much hidden. It goes beyond being flat. Yeah, I think it does go beyond being flat. I really do. I think, it may just be a plane of existence. I don't know. Yes, Chocolate. Jeranism. Go to Nathan Oakley's panel. Yeah, I'll show up there. They do it so early. For me, it would be like 6 a.m. I do not get up at 6 a.m. I want to be Don Pettit. Solitaire bear. Yeah, me too. I really do. I want to believe that we used to go to the moon, but we can't anymore because we destroyed that technology. The technology that was less impressive than a Game Boy. We destroyed that, and it's too expensive to get it back. Makes sense. You know. Prove it. That's your new slogan? All right. I like it. Prove it. It's good. Jay Tolan Media's videos, awesome. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I told you guys, buy some 3D glasses if you want to really trip out on some of Jay Tolan's new stuff. He does 3D videos, and they're cool to watch, and you can get the glasses pretty cheap. So then you have a leak. I love it. Post Turtle. Classic. I really appreciate no flat earth tags. Easier to share. Yep. I don't know what my tags are. I don't think there's anything flat earth. Just Jeranism, Truth, NASA, Quotes, Geocentrism, Newton, Einstein, Max Born, George Ellis, Barber, Hawking, Hubble. Just a bunch of the people's names. Aries Failure, Foucault, Pendulum, Multiverse. So yeah, I'll leave out flat earth from the... I think if people are flat earthers, they'll find my channel without me having to put that tag in there. And I just... maybe they'll let me monetize more videos. I don't know. So... airplane, not air ball. Great one. Mind Chris. That's beautiful. I like that. Jaron, you can also get in trouble for what a person comments in the chat section here. YouTube is ridiculous, especially with truthers and religious channels. Is that true, though? I don't think I can get in trouble for the chat because I don't show it. And I used to, but I don't know if people remember. I got a strike for that because somebody started... I used to share the chat on my little screen, with OBS, and you can use, I don't know what it's called, Stream8 or whatever. But I used to do that until somebody made a bunch of racist comments, and then my channel was gone for 3 months. So, yeah, I don't think you can get in trouble for the chat over here. I hope not. If so, that would be bad. Let's see here. We've been lied to for sure. Absolutely. They can even give strikes on comments now. Really? For comments on my video? Oh, boy, I'll have to check that out. That's scary. Take shrooms, LSD, and DMT at the same time and become Don Pettit. Huh? Or just fall down and severely hit your head. Either on, and I think that's how you end up. A lot of talk about Nibiru now. How does that sit with flat Earth? Well, I don't believe in huge, massive objects in the sky. Could the stars and planets be physical something? Maybe. Perhaps. I don't know. But I don't think that there's any kind of planet that's going to come in and offset our gravity and all that stuff. Let's see here. Looking forward to the Toronto conference. Hope to hang out again. Awesome. Hopefully people know too. I'm going to Amsterdam. That's going to be cool. Thanks, Drew Hurst. Appreciate that. Very kind. It would be interesting if you did some street interviews about the ball in California. Oh, man. I wish. Thank you, XJW Flatter. If you guys would have seen me answer the door today for Jehovah's Witnesses, there was 3 at my door today. And I closed the door after about 5-6 minutes of talking to them. My wife was dying. It was really funny because I just, they said, hey, can we talk to you about the Bible? I'm like, did you know that your Bible says that the earth is flat? They're like, no, it says it's a sphere. I'm like, no. You're talking about Isaiah? She's like, yep, Isaiah. I said, read it for me. So she read it, and I said, no, that says God sits above the circle of the earth. Do you know what a circle is? They said, oh. I said, do you believe in planets? And they said, well, there is such thing as planets. And I said, yeah, but how do you believe in God that he created all this? And what is he creating all that other stuff for? Why is there Jupiter? Why is there galaxies? Why is there all this nonsense? And they're just sitting there staring at me with these wide open eyes. And I said, you know that the earth you live on is flat, right? They just are like saucers. It was classic. It was a good time. Please do a video addressing while all the other planets are round. It's so clear that they're just lights and we can see one facade like the moon. Yeah, that's just a nonsense theory anyway. And that's what I mean by they rob you of your place by telling you that people have been to the moon. Then we all looked up and said, oh, people have landed there and stood on the sphere. Oh, I must live on a sphere too. But if the earth is all that there is, then what difference does it make what's up in the sky? It doesn't make a difference. The earth is the place where life exists, where everything exists, where all importance lies. So sending you some artwork and a new experiment I'm going to try. I hope you write me back. Thanks again. Okay, Sooner Squatch, appreciate that. I would love to know more about pole shift if it fits in your schedule. I don't buy into that. I mean, I'd have to look into that further. I just don't think it's as easy as they tell us and they can figure it all out. Oh boy. Let's see here. Anything else? Just tell them you're going to go get your husband. It was certainly funny. It went on and on and on, and they just stared at me after a while and stopped speaking. And then I was kind of, preaching to them. They probably didn't like that. They call you Satan. The Mormons do? I don't know. They left pretty. They tried to hand me some book as they left. Well, here, will you read this? Because God, your God has a name or something. And I said, yeah, thank you. I know God's name, and shoved them on their way. But it was nice. I was nice to them. I wasn't rude. I didn't not answer the door. I gave them a good conversation and told them to think about it. So we'll see. What do you think about the infrared videos filmed on airplanes from the Russian guy? I don't know if you mean Jay Tolan or what. Yeah, the football is a sphere, so the football field has to be too. Yeah, hilarious. Very, very funny. So other planets are just lights now. I have no idea what they are. I'm not the one making a claim that we can go there, that we have, craft and orbits of them. That's not me. That's somebody else telling you that, and I'm simply looking for proof of what they're telling us and not finding it. So, again, you can believe a bunch of people sitting around at consoles looking at computer screens can tell that, Has anyone checked out, by the way, I want to just do a plug real quick for SGT Report. We just had Marty Leeds and Dave Weiss on with Sean. Excellent video. He's got 500,000 subscribers, and he even put a little clip of me at the end. So check out that video. It seemed like it's going to be great. And is Marty Leeds live here? Marty, I hope he's here. I see Glowbuster saying hi to him, but I don't see him. There he is. What's up, Marty? Great job today, man. Or whenever you did that, a couple days ago or whatever. But I thought you guys did a bang-up job as always. So appreciate that. And you shouted me out again, Marty. So yeah, everybody subscribe and check out Marty Leeds, who gets it. One of the worst of anybody from YouTube. Keeps shutting down his channel. And he just does a lot of videos like I do, where he just sits and reads books and talks to you about his opinion and what the hell is wrong with that. I'll never understand it, how anybody can get rid of stuff like that. Yeah, peace to you too, as well, Marty. Awesome meeting Marty in Denver this year. You did a bang-up job and stepped in as a designated hitter, knocked it out of the park. So appreciate that, Marty. You're awesome. So you just don't believe it, so therefore it's all a lie? No. Nope, you're not quite understanding what I'm saying. You'll have to go back and watch this video again. I said that there's no proof of those things. So I don't believe things. I don't place things into my belief category until they're sufficiently proven. Now, unfortunately, I was taught at such a young age about the heliocentric model that by default, I had to put that into my belief category. I didn't have a choice. So that's the problem. So all those things became beliefs. And there's certainly nothing wrong with when you get to an old enough age to look back on the things you were taught as part of your public education, your free education, and say, okay, let me go find proof of these things. Since I was taught them, this should be readily available. And when you do that, you end up like me. You end up realizing that there's just so much that you can't prove out there, and all the people that told you that these things were scientific, it's on them to prove it to you. So it's not a matter of I don't believe it, so it's just not true. No, it's not a matter. It's if somebody's telling me something is true, then they damn well better prove it. And if they can't prove it, then that's on them. I don't care. So I'm not the one making claims. I don't make a claim as to, what I think is in the sky. I don't make a claim of what I think the moon is. I think that they're amazing, unbelievable, predictable gifts from the Creator, signs of design, signs of intelligence, signs of perfection, never failing, always there. Those are signs of design. You can call them signs of accidents if you want, but go take an airplane and crash it into a wall, a billion times and tell me how many times the sun and moon come out and they're perfect size in the sky and create eclipses. The answer, 0. Renee, what's up, man? Question Everything Conference 2019. Is that going on now? I think so, or somewhere close. Hey, what's going on here? I got some, let's see here. I got some Venmo. I forgot about Venmo. Some people have started sending some donations through Venmo. So if you want to do that, you can just search @Jeranism. That'd be great if you enjoyed the video. Just like if you went to an open bar at maybe a wedding or something, I think you tip the bartender. But again, it's not required. So if I'm the bartender at an open bar and you ask for a glass of wine and a beer and a tequila sunrise, I'm going to give them to you and I'm going to be nice about it, whether or not you tip me. But the great thing is that some people at that wedding party will feel, they'll say, hey, this guy, bartender's great, nice guy, and I'd like to tip him $1 or $2. So if you'd like to do that for me, I would appreciate it. Let me head out of here because I think it's been a while. I don't know how long we've been on now, but quite a while. Let's, I want to be Don Pettit. Yeah, got all the super chats. Thank you guys so much for those. And let me bring this back up just so we can finish off. So if you want to support this channel, there's a lot of ways to do so. You can, first and foremost, or most importantly, or thanks to all my patrons, but you can go to paypal.me/Jaron. That's an easy one to do. Anything will help. $1, $2, whatever you want. Or just share, or just watching the video and hitting a thumbs up is awesome. Or if you want to become a patron, that is my income source right now for the most part, and really appreciate them helping me do what I love to do. I can't thank them enough. I don't even know where to begin thanking them. So that's at patreon.com/Jeranism. So you can do that as well. And then also you can, if you want to shop at Amazon, or you do shop at Amazon, you can go to my link first, which you can either go to my website and hit support and then Amazon. It'll take you right over to Amazon. Or you can type in j.mp/JeranAMZ. And if you do that, it'll take you to Amazon. And then anything you buy, you pay the same price. You won't even notice any difference, but I get a small percent, which adds up when I get a lot of people doing that. Hey, I'll always take an extra, $100 a month, and thank everybody for doing that. And, nobody's paying anything different. I'm not asking you to go shop at Amazon, but if you already do, you can either let that money go to Jeff Bezos, or you can, kick me at 2%. That'd be awesome. Also, if you want to send me any mail, you can do so at P.O. Box 3044, Merced, California 95344. You can do that. And besides that, guys, I'll remind you, as always, thank you, though. I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody in the chat. And yeah, go check out the SGT report. Or you can check it out on Marty Leach's channel, I believe. Or you can go to SGT, subscribe to Sean. He does some great videos tackling some of these tough issues, and is one of the guys dealing with the censorship like the rest of us. Check out Red Pill Philosophy, doing a great job banging it out with daily videos. Another guy who's heavily censored. So yeah, help him out if you can as well. As always, check out Globebusters. We're live every Sunday at noon. Jeranism Raw every Monday at 6 on TFR. And again, do your own research, because when you do, you'll never again believe what you've been taught. Till next time, guys, this has been Jeranism. Peace.